Good evening. Today is Tuesday, December 13th. This is the regular Board of Education meeting. Roll call, Mrs. Kennelly, Mr. Compertito, Mr. Liu, Mrs. Gerber, Ms. Iacono, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fatabine, I presume is on his way, Mr. Carey, and Mrs. Brand are present, along with Dr. Title from the administration. Will you all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? The first item on our agenda is a presentation on the Safe School Climate Plan, which is enclosure number 1 in your packet. Dr. Title, I'll turn this over to you and your staff.
Hey, Ms. Leonardi has taken the lead on this for the school system, for which we are quite grateful, and she has worked with a broad-based committee to draft the Safe School Climate Plan, which by state law needs to be submitted to the state by January 1st. We put this on as a discussion item for no action tonight, and even though the next board meeting isn't until January, we did get a written notification from the state that that is permissible, and we can submit the draft and then submit a revised version when the board approves it. So,
thank you. I am really pleased to be here tonight to begin the conversation about school climate and planning and addressing specifically school climate issues from a systemic level. I need to start by saying our schools address school climate all the time. They're constantly considering school climate in the programs they create, in different recognition systems they create. So at the building level, this is not new work. It is, however, new work at the system level. And so I caution us not to believe that we're at kind of the starting point. What I presented to you, what you got in your Friday packets, is the Safe School Climate Plan, and I call it version 1.0. I anticipate that this climate plan will be a flexible document. It's going to change as data suggests it needs to. So I don't want people to get stuck that this is the only kind of bite at this apple. This is the beginning of what I hope will be a conversation that will go on indefinitely and constantly to address positive school climates at each of our buildings and at the district level. If you look at the plan, just from how to read this document, if you remember back, those of you from the previous board, if you remember when we did the policy on bullying, there were a fair number of questions from the board about where Fairfield took a step beyond just what the law required. So what I did for you here is throughout the document you'll see that there are some sections that are underlined. Those are sections where Fairfield went beyond what the law required. So I wanted to highlight that for you and for the public in some way so that you could actually look at it specifically and see where that was. So that's what those underlines are about. Okay, getting into the plan, the first thing I put in the plan was I reiterated the mission and the beliefs that the Fairfield Public Schools, that the current strategic plan have in there. Because I think if you read through that list of beliefs, you're going to see many beliefs that speaks directly to school climate. I will point out to you the belief that kindness, respect, and compassion enhance life and improve performance. Not only do we believe that, but the research tells us that's true. We believe that growth occurs when independent thinking, creativity, and appropriate risk-taking are encouraged. That's about intellectual safety. And so safety is not just physical safety, but social, emotional, and intellectual safety as well. And you can read these, but there are a number that really speak to school climate and the important foundation that a positive school climate lays to everything else we do, to teaching and learning, to student achievement. When you look at this plan, the district plan really begins to lay out a new infrastructure. The state legislation, which is the amended Section 10222D of Connecticut General Statute, really does everything in its power other than to put a big red slash across it to say this is not an unfunded mandate. All over the law you see at no additional cost, with no additional staff, with no additional. So all of the things you're seeing here are going to be done by staff who currently hold full-time positions. And I think that's going to be critical as we assess it year after year, what the impact of that is. But we will have, beginning now, a school climate coordinator. That's me. I will be the district school climate coordinator. We'll also have a district school climate team, which will be made up of building-based staff as well as community members and parents and students, who will begin to help us look at the work from a district perspective. Each building will identify a school climate specialist, a person who will be providing or beginning to provide some leadership at the building level around school climate initiatives and helping all staff to understand the role adults play in creating a positive school climate. I do want to stress that, this is about adult behavior as well. This is about what we adults do, parents included. So when we think about school climate, we're not just thinking about student behavior. We're thinking about all adult behavior, all community behavior within the walls of that school. These specialists will be leading small teams at the building level to look at the data that we create, to look at the data about school climate, to look at how we're addressing reports of not only bullying, but any kind of discriminatory behavior or what we're calling mean-spirited behavior in general, because that's where you start to make change. You start to make change at the little mean-spirited behaviors that go on in schools that don't allow bullying to take place or allow bullying to grow. There's a significant piece of the legislation that looks at training of staff. I think it's important to note that school employees have a very broad definition here. This means basically anybody who has a role to play in and around the school. This is going to include coaches, bus drivers, paraprofessionals, school secretaries. We're going to be doing wholesale training to the adults in schools to help them recognize and understand what this behavior looks like, what its impact is on students, their obligations to intervene, and their obligations to report. So we'll be doing a tremendous amount of training. And we're looking at ways so that that training doesn't impact our professional development time. We know that our teachers need to spend time looking at high-end teaching strategies, but this is going to be critical information that needs to get into the hands of all adults each year annually. I added a section for ongoing training for school climate specialists and ongoing training for team members. Those of you who've ever tried to lead a team to do work, that requires training in and of itself. That just doesn't happen. So we're going to put in place in Fairfield some annual and ongoing training for those people who choose to serve in that capacity so that we can maintain some system integrity there. You see, I've spelled out the roles that we see those people playing so you can get a sense of that, and I'd be happy to answer questions. There's a piece of this, and it begins on page 7, and it's the assessment piece. That assessment should be highlighted as well and bolded, because that's an area I think we need to spend a fair amount of time discussing. The legislation requires that the state will provide each district with a survey for staff, students, and parents that is required to be done every other year at the state level. We don't think that's enough. We think we should be asking our students and our faculty, our school employees, and our parents their feelings about school climate annually. Another concern we have is that again, in the effort to have no unfunded mandate, the state is creating a homegrown survey. And I've seen some beginning drafts of those surveys, and frankly, I'm concerned that they're neither valid nor reliable, And I'm worried that that data will drive decision-making that may not be accurate. And so we're recommending that the Fairfield Public Schools survey annually, but that we require the criteria set out here for our survey, the survey we select, that it meet certain validity and reliability criteria, that it recognize the voice of parents and students, that it be aligned between those groups, so that if students are, we want to look at student perception as it compares to teacher and parent perception, because that's where we can see where there's misalignment or misperception on any one part, and we can act on that. That's important to us. We want it to result in a detailed report at the building and district level, and we want that to happen within 2 to 3 weeks of the close of the survey window. I don't want this to be like a CMT, where we take it in March and we get information 6 months later. It's too late. We want to get it within 2 or 3 weeks so that we can publish it and get to work. So we're putting that in as a criteria for a survey we would select. We also want the survey just not to be a report card. This is not about finding fault. This is about planting the seeds of change. So we want whatever survey we choose to help drive improvement, to give us a direction and a path to go in. So we're going to, that would be part, should you choose to support this piece of the plan, that would be a part of the RFP, was that the company that would provide this to us would need to also provide us with ongoing support for taking that information and looking at ways we could make improvement in areas that are identified at both the school and district level. We also wanted a survey that would allow us to disaggregate based on subgroup data so that we could look at differences in gender, look at differences by all of the other kind of NCLB categories, by race, by gender, by disability status, so that we could understand whether or not different subgroups of students and their families have different experiences in our schools to help us to make some real change for those subgroups that might otherwise not be heard loudly in a singular, in a non-disaggregated survey. So I think the assessment piece of this puzzle, from my perspective, is an area that we'd really like some direction from the board on. And then we get to the part of the plan that I think is of grave concern to people, and that is what to do if bullying is reported or alleged bullying is reported. And so what we took here is we began to look at how the new definition of bullying, what the impact of that will be, and developing a district-wide system that would take place pre-K through 12th grade for how bullying is reported, when it must be reported, by whom it must be reported, when a report of bullying takes place, who's responsible, and what happens next. And then we'll have a consistent framework of forms and reporting opportunities for that work. So that's outlined as well. It also speaks to when a verified act of bullying, when the investigation leads us to the conclusion that bullying has in fact taken place, or behavior that meets the statutory definition of bullying. So when there has been behavior that meets that definition, then additional requirements are in place. And they're not just disciplinary. I think an important piece of this plan is that if and when there is behavior that is verified as an act of bullying, both the victim and the perpetrator, the plan is a safety plan for both and an intervention plan. For the victim, an intervention plan to teach them skills and competencies necessary to decrease the likelihood of further victimization. For the perpetrator, a plan that will teach the skills and competencies and dispositions so that they won't resort to that kind of behavior to have whatever need is met. And so we're very clear to spell out that this is not just about discipline. This is not just about the consequence for the behavior, but our obligation to use that as an opportunity to teach. These are children. They will make mistakes. They will do things that they learn in other arenas and bring them into school. And So each and every plan will be implemented, monitored for fidelity, and will also include not only discipline, but will include intervention for the part of both the victim and the perpetrator. An area in this section that I think is important for the board to recognize and the community to know is that this legislation adds a new mandated reporter status. As you all know, all school employees are mandated reporters of suspected child abuse and neglect. So that's what I mean when I say mandated reporter. This adds a new mandated reporting. When and if behavior that happens at school reaches the bounds of potential criminality. Up to this point, it was permissible for school administrators to report to the police. It is now required. So no longer can we say, we're not going to report that, we'll deal with it internally. Now we will be required to report to law enforcement any behavior that we believe may in fact constitute a crime. We're not responsible to investigate criminal behavior. We report to the police, who then would investigate. But it is a new requirement that I thought we should highlight here tonight. So currently, I have a team of about 20 people that include staff and some very able-bodied and willing community members who have been reading some of this and are continuing to provide input to me as we go through this drafting process. The administrators are weighing in on certain things as well. But I wanted to just come tonight and answer any questions you may have. If there are areas that you think are unclear or not in the direction that you think they should be, I'd like to get that feedback from you, and we can move forward toward the January, and hopefully you'll be able to support this then. Any questions? I'm happy to respond.
Anybody have any questions? Mr. Liu?
Thank you. I love this. Thank you. It's definitely a step in the right direction. I think it's a great step from the state, and definitely I'm very excited that our schools have taken a step to go above and beyond sometimes. So I think this is a great first start. I do have some questions.
Okay.
Is there going to be a chain of command? And you did answer some of it when you said you were the, I'm still trying to get this word in my head, the climate specialist.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be the climate specialist for the district. And how will a chain of command work in terms of climate specialists at each schools, the principals, talking to you, possibly also talking with the superintendent in terms of I don't know, the reporting of issues like this?
Mm-hmm. Issues will get reported. You want the issues to be reported at the closest level to the student, to the reporter. So it starts at the building level, and certainly I can provide some flow charts as you know as we get to that point, so that it's very clear what the chains are. But certainly, the school climate specialist will be a new and trained individual at the building site, but really the building leadership comes from the administration. And so this all looks at the building administration designating particular roles and tasks. And in our district, that looks different at each level based on the support staff that's available. So at the elementary level, it's going to look very different than it does in the middle and the high because of the different infrastructures in place at those levels.
Okay.
But certainly the building leadership is where this begins.
So, thank you. I guess I had a few other questions I had, which were the reporting of it. On page 8, at the bottom, it said in school employees, and I'm assuming from one of the things you had just said about that this was something that came from the state. I mean, one of the questions that I had was why 2 days before a report had to be written? One of my concerns would be that in the time that something is said or reported, even orally, if there isn't something going into the process where we know exactly what's happened, we have the details, that this could happen again to the same victim or the same perpetrator. Can you talk a little bit to that?
Well, this is an area where the state set the time frame. I think it gives the oral notification, it gives 24 hours to get that done, and then 2 hours following that to have a written report filed. I think we have to be realistic with our staff. We're going to be asking people to report not just what they believe might meet the statutory definition of bullying. We're going to ask them to report on a number of different behaviors so that we can start to see where behavior happens, where it happens, when it happens, not only for the purposes of discipline. The reporting structure here is really meant to help all of us understand what's happening in our buildings, where, when, and why mean-spirited behavior happens, so that we can begin to address that, even if it's just from supervisory schedules being different.
Right.
Where the supervision is, where people are during the day. So this is a beginning piece of the puzzle. We may want to address this as we start to gather data on the reporting and we start to train people about reporting. But until then, I'd be hesitant to try to say you have to make an oral notification within 10 minutes and then a written document. I'd be hesitant to do that right now. This
Okay.
may be an area for version 2.0
Right.
to think about.
Yeah.
But certainly, I think implementing it now, the training, and then we start to gather the data and see what would happen.
Yeah, I think that's my general feeling with the next question as well, which is that the time period right now between now and the full implementation of this, the time between any type of report and then starting an investigation, what happens in those time periods? And I'm not necessarily asking you to answer it right now, but I guess in between getting this maybe even to January or in the process of between January and 2.0, that we might need to have some type of timelines so that with all of the stuff that goes on in a school, a report is made and then it just doesn't get lost, that there is a time element that goes into effect so that we can not only have the report in, but that there are steps so that it doesn't become an ongoing investigation that just goes on and on and on, et cetera, et cetera.
We did a lot of thinking about the length of time for the investigation. The law says something about reasonable. And we thought about whether or not a time frame should be spelled out more specifically. And if you've ever conducted an investigation, you know that some can be done and finished pretty quickly. Some, you start to uncover things and you have a tip of the iceberg effect, and you need a little more time to do an effective job. So again, in version 1.0, we want to do some very robust training of our staff to understand how to conduct investigations, and then look to see, and we're going to monitor the time from report to completion and start to see what that looks like. And that's going to help us define what we think reasonable is. I don't want to see investigations go on too long either, but I don't want to give them short shrift. And I don't want to add an arbitrary time element if someone needs more time to be more thorough.
I think it's a good answer. I mean, I wouldn't want to, again, hamstring you so that you know, an investigation couldn't go on longer if it needed to be. But I maybe am looking for, as you get to learn more about this, having some language in there that helps move from one step to the next step to the next step without lag, and yet still allows you the freedom to have something go more thorough if needs be, et cetera. That was it, except to say again that I'm very happy with where this is going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Compertito?
One first, I think it's a great first draft. I appreciate the effort that went into it. You mentioned a flow chart earlier. Actually, I had it in my notes. I think a flow chart would be very beneficial, especially to your employees, to know where it's going. I had one question, actually under bullying reports on the bottom of page 8. And maybe it can be clarified in future drafts and so forth. And more for parents and victims. When it says that they orally notify the school if an employee witnesses it, I'm on this school employee must section, okay? It gets reported to the climate specialist or school administrator. Do those reports then filter up to you on a monthly or weekly or whatever? Do you see all of those to make sure that this process is being
Yes.
handled. I mean, I know that you're in a training period here with, you know, with that, but it would seem to me that all of those would, at some point in time, within, 10 days of a report or something, should land on your desk, or whoever is going to assume that role long-term.
The intent is for all of the reports of behavior, and then obviously all of the completed investigations, should a bullying report be made, that those would come to the district school climate coordinator, and that we would then use that information. We would obviously redact anything that was personally identifiable, but we would use that information at the district team level to see if we see patterns. And those patterns might then generate further training, might then generate further professional development at the school employee level. So the intent is to use that information. My job will be to monitor to make sure that the overall plan is being implemented effectively, but there's a secondary benefit to that, which is using that data to help make sure that we're moving in the direction we want. For example, if incidents are happening at one school and you never see them in the aggregate form across all of our middle schools, for example, not that the middle schools have an issue, but the middle schools, then we'd want to be able to look at more systemic kinds of training rather than focusing in on one school all alone. And we want to be able to share best practice. Conversely, if we see a school that's not experiencing that, we want to go in and take a look at what's happening there to be able to replicate any of the effective practices that may be happening at a building level within a school's culture and climate.
I just have one more comment, and it goes back to your belief sections. And I know the document is targeted towards bullying and so forth, but when we talk about a school atmosphere and this list of beliefs, I'd like to see, at least personally, that the climate specialist for a school is also addressing these and making sure these are being implemented, from a positive standpoint. Right. So it's just not an anti-bullying document. We're looking at the whole climate picture in a school to making sure that we're moving that forward.
I appreciate, that is kind of the purpose of the whole first section of this. And so thank you for reiterating that. This is not just about bullying. This is about many aspects of school climate that impact the nature and quality of school life for kids, for teachers, for adults in the school. And it is our belief, research supported, that if you address school climate in a systemic and in a specific way, then the incidents, you decrease the likelihood for bullying and ongoing bullying events to occur. We can't do magic here. We have work to do in this area, both on the bullying side, but also on the school climate side. But I do think that if we focus in beyond just bullying, we're going to do a better job overall.
I saw Mrs. Brand.
This is a big step and a great undertaking. I had several questions. On page 4, we have district school climate team, and we list the number or types of members that we would be including.
Yes.
Do we have any indication of the proportion, the composition, meaning how many students, how many community members? And my concern is that I think we want it to literally reflect the community, so we don't have a bias in any way of someone from the outside looking in or someone from the inside.
Yeah, the challenge is to have a team that is actually able to function. So, we will have 17 school climate specialists, so that's your base there. And then certainly we want to have students representing the group, parents representing the group, but I think if you start looking at every single school, then we might end up with a team that's just too large to function adequately.
Oh, no,
So it's a challenge. We're going to look to have
Right, I'm actually
good
not-
cross-section representation. We're going to look to our buildings to help us to identify, and then community members as well, not just parents, but
Yeah,
community
because I think
members.
the perspective is going to be valuable, and if
Sure.
we have, quite frankly, all parents, all students, as opposed to all faculty, that could skew what direction you take. And that's why I would like to see it better defined, so I have a sense of what direction you're going to go in. And page 6, I had concern, because we're talking about the committee and the committee decisions, and if you look at page 6, and there's the last bullet, which is number 7, it gives the principal on the location, to me, an awful lot of autonomy at that site to make a lot of the decisions, which to me then negates the committee's having any impact. And that would be a concern, that any one person with something like that wouldn't be, a veto or an override.
Are you talking about the bullet that reads, perform any other duties as determined by the principal that are related to improving school climate?
Prevention, intervention, yes. I think what you want to do is make sure that the things are carried out by faculty, and I understand that. What I'm concerned about is that this could be misconstrued, and someone might think that it is the principal that is running the meeting and determining exactly what the school climate committee is doing. That's my point.
The intent of this, and perhaps it's unclear, the intent of this is that at a school site, based on their data, if there are activities that the school administration, along with the team, feel would be of benefit, then they should have, and I would argue that that's exactly what we want them to do, is
Right.
to look at their small subset of the whole and to work on those things. So that is not intended to give the
Right,
school
I know.
administration veto power in any way over anything.
Right, I know. I think
I
what
mean-
you're trying to say is that the school principal and the faculty will follow the recommendations, if you will, as opposed to have the principal,
The intent of this bullet was that the principal could assign to the committee other activities relative to school climate in that building. This is the list of the
I guess that's my point, but-
responsibilities of the school climate team,
but based on what? On the committee's
based
issue?
on the school's overall school improvement plan.
Okay, because then we're talking two different things about school climate versus school improvement plan? I just-
When you looked at this, there's a section in this that,
Right.
from this point, for beginning in 2012,
Yep,
that part of every school's school climate plan will include a domain about school climate.
Right.
So one is a part of the other.
right, right. I guess in terms of the school climate, though, I thought that portion of it, in terms of recommendation, would be from the committee to the principal. The principal then would take those recommendations and incorporate it into the school improvement plan.
The principal, I just don't see them as separate things. I think the principal is part and parcel of all committees in his or her building. So they may, they're seeking input from the committee itself, but ultimately the principal is responsible for the overall school improvement plan. So I don't see it as separate. I see the principal as part of the
Right.
group who's making determinations about what the overall school plan is. I just don't see them separately, but I'll work on some clarity there if you think it needs that.
Yeah, because I just want to make sure that we all have a mutual understanding of what the intent is. Also, Mr. Liu mentioned timeline. My timeline is a little bit different when you think, and it combines actually what Mr. Compertito was saying. This is really a lot of the regs that we were referring to earlier about bullying and the bullying policy and how we're going to carry this out. The other part I have is, when do we think that we're going to be able to go beyond this? And I know you've just done, climbed a mountain, and now I'm asking you, when do you think you're going to climb the next mountain?
Well, I'm at base camp 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
My oxygen tanks have run out, but I'm at base camp 1. I think the first step is going to be, I think 2.0 will come out once we determine what our assessment's going to be. So, and then we have to go into the process of selecting that assessment, taking baseline data on that assessment, and then starting to do the work. So I think, for me, regardless of what the board decides in terms of moving forward with assessment, the assessment piece of this, we've got training modules to write, create, and roll out to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people.
Oh, yeah.
Then we've got to start to look at what the data coming back looks like, the number of reports, how those reports are being handled, how those investigations are happening. We have robust training to complete and plan with our school climate specialists, and then the next step of that is your school climate teams at the district and building level to get them prepared to do the work?
I think I'm thinking on a very practical level. If I'm a parent and I have a child who's being bullied, what, based on what we have now, should their expectation be that the school will be doing for them?
They should expect, once we come to some consensus that this is the way we're headed, they should expect that once they make a report, that report will be investigated. All reports will be investigated.
You mean like next when we vote on this in January?
Beginning now.
Okay, well, that's...
It will happen, the investigation of bullying reports will take place as soon as we come to consensus about what that looks like. That's where we'll be.
Okay.
I will tell you that those activities will improve as those people become better trained.
Right.
Right? So as we train on conducting investigations, our investigation processes will improve. So we're going to do it now. You will see continuous improvement in the outcome of those processes as people become more comfortable with the process. And as students become more comfortable knowing that reporting of this kind of behavior, teachers, paras, secretaries, all of people are reporting, then we have obligations to investigate and to follow through on those outcomes.
I just want to remind everybody, it's 5 after 8, so if we could start to wrap this up, because it's a work in progress.
2 more questions. We have reporting, and this involves a lot of behavioral issues, so is part of that reporting process also going to have a referral for social work? And also, if we're reporting to the police, have we worked out how we're going to manage that? Because most of our students are minors. Those are my last two.
The part of the intervention plan will include where the teaching construct is going to be. So it may be a referral to social work, it may be some other teaching plan, but it will be a written plan that the parent would have as well. In terms of the police and the reporting to law enforcement, we've got to do some work with law enforcement, which is also on my list of many things to do, because we need to do some training with our staff from law enforcement, so we have that on the list. And then ultimately, we will have to, we understand our students are minors, and we would want to work with our law enforcement officials and with parents to understand when we make those reports and what their rights are. So we don't want to trample anyone's rights, but we do have a new mandated reporter status that we need to understand and implement effectively.
All right, anybody else? Because I want to start to move along. Mr. Carey?
Thank you. And I too am very encouraged about where we're going with this. Just by seeing the terms predator and victim, it tells me that we are using the right semantics and we're recognizing this. Can I assume by seeing those terms that conflict resolution is not going to be part of our process in terms of? Okay. How about bystanders?
That's part of our prevention work, is going to look at changing the culture of bystander and creating allies. So that's a part of that whole prevention piece. We'll be looking at the best practices related to that really sits squarely in the school climate versus the bullying side.
Okay.
You strengthen the people to not stand around and do nothing when mean-spirited behavior happens.
I noted page 9 had reference to a few appendices.
They're coming.
Okay. Have they been formulated yet, or?
The forms are well underway to being created. They're not ready for prime time yet, but they're well underway in construction. And then I will be adding additional appendices to provide further research data and things so that when we publish this and it goes live on the web, that parents will have a number of different links to support it. So we're really lining up a lot of different pieces for when this goes live on the web once you vote it into effect.
Okay. And if, Ms. Leonardi, how you envision this, for example, I see that we have an intervention plan for victims, an intervention plan for perpetrators. It speaks very clearly to the point that FERPA does not allow us to disclose what punishments are. Can you just speak to how these intervention plans will, in a situation where bullying has escalated to the point of physical violence, assure parents of the safety of their children in the school?
Well, each instance would be somewhat individualized to the incident itself. I would imagine that in the event that ongoing or repeated acts of bullying were happening and decisions about separating children to different schools might be a piece of a puzzle. There might be many different aspects. It's hard to point to one that's going to be the answer. Certainly, repeated acts of violence and aggression would require a further isolation of the perpetrator. The victim doesn't become the isolate. That's not what happens. We take care of the victim, we make their environment safe. If the perpetrator's behavior can't change, then we further separate the perpetrator and the victim.
One thing that I think will be important to parents and a concern of mine is that because of the FERPA restrictions, it's very difficult for parents to understand what's going on the other side of the equation. So obviously the safety of the victims has to be paramount here, and I think it's sometimes a challenge, but we want to make sure that that formulation is one that will assure the parents that are sending children into our district 6.5 hours a day, 182 days a year, of the safety of their children. I also think this is long on responsibility for the district and for your team. And I assume that there's still going to be more AR that comes in that talks about consequences and personal and parental responsibility as part of this process.
School climate is about all of our behavior, all adult behavior, and it's going to include, we're going to need to, as we go into version 2.0 and 3.0, we're going to need to talk about adult behavior beyond just that of teachers and students. We really need to think about all of our behavior and what we are teaching our kids in terms of how to behave with each other in disagreement, how to resolve conflict, how to deal with imbalances of power, how to deal with people who are different than yourself, how to encourage opportunities for allowing people to live in peace in the community. That's all part of the work ahead. This is not just about kids. This is about all of us.
Okay, and lastly, alluding to the question Mrs. Brand had, obviously we don't have no bullying policy, as you alluded to earlier in the meeting. Can you just tell us a little bit about where we are and where this is going to take us to in terms of right now, today, what this kind of how things are resolved on a building by building level, I guess, or what? Can you just draw that roadmap for us?
Right now, you just passed the bullying policy about a month ago, the newest update to the bullying policy about a month ago. So it's in the hands of administrators and certainly our school climate specialists. That's part and parcel of the training we began in November with them. And so we are looking at our investigatory practices. We're looking at what currently exists, and we've used that as part of our piece as we create these plans. Once this plan is developed, then new forms will go into effect, and we'll begin to gather data and monitor the fully fleshed out investigation reports. That's going to provide us a tremendous amount of information for growth. It's hard to do right now because each building does, they're all following the policy, they just don't have systemic efforts to do it. So each building's work looks a little bit different, so trying to align it is somewhat difficult. This is going to help that tremendously, I think. So that's, the policy is in effect, the administrative regulations will help, and then starts the training package. It's really the biggest piece I can tell you right now is about getting training into the hands of all school employees as defined here. That means all coaches, and I mean, I can't tell you the number of people who we need to train. So our district committee's first work is twofold. One, it's the assessment side of this, and two, it's the building of training modules for all of these people so that that can happen, which will begin to improve the process.
Thank you.
Mr. Dwyer and then Mr. Fatimie.
4 comments, if I could, that don't require a response, but perhaps when you come in January, you might remember those 4 comments and give me some updates then. One is I do believe that the policy, the wording of it, reacts very much to the to the bullying activities that might take place and our response to them. While the word prevention is mentioned several places, I think one area that Fairfield could go well above and beyond the state law is to have a larger focus on prevention. You mentioned that we want to go from bullying to mean-spirited activities, but I would suggest if you go one step further and just say, what are the excluding behaviors that happen? Because it starts there, not just in mean-spirited activities. And it might be settled by what do you mean by mean-spirited activities, and have a better definition of that. Whenever I've done surveys trying to get at what are the issues out there, there's always this question of trust. If I fill out the survey, what's going to happen? We have students who are trying to graduate, they're trying to get into high school and college, and if you might think of whether some recent alumni no longer have those issues, they're off to college, they're out of college, whether they might have some information on their experiences in our school district that would be helpful to you, and include them in that community group. Second, I do agree with Mrs. Brand that I think a stronger statement of what the principal's role is as the primary change agent for the school climate. Make it a stronger document. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Fattabine.
I'd like to say you did a very good job in a difficult subject area. And my comment is that your very behavior in a different context than what bullying is defined as under our policy, and something, especially when it's something less than bullying is defined in our policy. So I agree, Mr. Dwyer, in the sense that it should be a little better defined what you mean by that specifically, as well as I would suggest that on page 8 of your climate plan here, you have school employees who witness acts of bullying, in parentheses, harassment or mean-spirited behavior, or receive reports of bullying, must report bullying. So, in other words, one of my suggestions, if you mean mean-spirited behavior as something less than full bullying, that you may want to divide out the procedure for how you treat mean-spirited behavior versus how you treat bullying, because if you go through treating mean-spirited behavior as you do a bullying incident, you're going to have a lot of incidents possibly, and a lot of investigation, and a lot of other things that are triggered that you may not really need or really want to devote resources to. So those are just my comments.
Mrs. Kennelly.
Very quickly, first, one thing just to consider possibly for the future. On page 9, when it regards to the contacting of parents, this may be an issue, this may not. I just want to put it out there as a topic. I think the order in which the parents are spoken with could be an issue, in that I can easily see that the parents of the victim would expect to be spoken with first, in terms of if there's anything else that they would need to say before the parent of the perpetrator. I'm not sure about that. Again, that's where data could come in, but I just wanted to say that. Second, and perhaps it's in paperwork that isn't included here, but given recent events in our country, I think having explicit inclusion of when the police become involved, whether it's time frame or anything else, given chain of command issues, as I said, in incidents elsewhere in the country, I think it might help clarify, I mean, whether it's part of the flow chart or the time frame, but just explicitly mentioning that. And third, although you, of course, say the unfunded mandate, and while you seem to be willing to adopt an additional hat, and my hat is off to you for that, I can't imagine that in the schools themselves that this isn't going to become a budget issue.
I think, trust me, we're all concerned about it. Right? Trust me. I think the school climate specialists, when we talk about this, we're all very invested in this work. Okay, all of us are very invested in this work. We think it is important work to do. We're concerned about how we're going to do all of our jobs and do this well. We want to do it well. Right. The law makes sure it's going to not be an unfunded mandate. I think we may need to address this. Until we see it in action, we're not going to be able to know. It's just kind of a fear without any data, right? A year from now, we may need to address that if we're going to do it well. We can do it, but if we want to do it well, then I think we may need to address that a year from now. Right now, we're all a little concerned.
Right. And one last staffing question is that, of course, on page, well, not of course, on page 10, there's the mention of a case manager being appointed. And again, just obviously something we're going to have to keep track of because that's demanding somebody's time.
Yes, you're right.
Thank you. Dr. Title?
I just want, that's a perfect segue into the comment I wanted to talk about, which was the money. I'm in budget mode, as my staff is all too aware. And I think that there's longer-term staffing costs that Andrea is right. We're not quite sure what that might be, and I don't think we're in a position right now to advocate for any change in that respect until we run through this for a year and see exactly what the burdens are. But if we are going to do, as much as the state says it's an unfunded mandate, it's not. It is an unfunded mandate. And if we are going to commit to be doing a survey the way Andrea describes it, on an annual basis, meeting the criteria that she outlined, there's going to be a cost to that. And as we develop the budget, and what that cost is unknown right now. That number may show up in there. I don't want sure you want to be boxed in yet to committing to that in a plan, and then down in May, the budget really is squeezed, and it's okay, the survey or a teaching position. Now you got a different decision to make. So we need to be careful about these costs. And in a vacuum, it all sounds wonderful. When we put all the numbers together and we have to make decisions about scarce resources, we're going to have to make some tough decisions down the road. So I don't think it's a deal breaker. I want to make sure we have all our options on the table because we don't know where we're going with this budget and what the outcome is going to be at the end of the day. So I also want to really thank Andrea and the team for doing the heavy lifting on this. We're open to more feedback from not just the board, but from the public. Andrea can take email from anybody who's interested, and we would appreciate that. I've marked mine all up, and I'm going to hand it in to her, so feel free to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to wrap up by saying this is an excellent step in the right direction. I think it's a sad reflection of our society when you have to legislate teaching people these kinds of things. And I fully agree with Dr. Title. I find it frustrating that this stuff needs to come down from the state where they try and pretend it doesn't cost any money, but it does. And the mere fact that you said the words RFP meant money right off the bat. So this is going to cost money. It doesn't mean it's not worth the investment, but this is certainly going to cost money. All right, moving on to our next item, approval of minutes. I need a motion to, that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the special meeting of November 17th, 2011, moved by Mrs. Brand, seconded by Mrs. Gerber. Any discussion? If you weren't present, yes, you can abstain from that. Correct, if you weren't on the board, yes. All in favor? Voting in favor, Mrs. Brand, Mr. Carey, Mr. Fattabine, Ms. Iacono. All opposed? Abstentions. Mrs. Kennelly, Mr. Compertito, Mr. Liu, Mrs. Gerber, and Mr. Dwyer. Motion passes. Approval of the minutes for the regular organizational meeting of November 22nd. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the regular organization meeting of November 22nd, 2011. Moved by Mr. Dwyer, seconded by Mrs. Kennelly. All in favor? It's unanimous. Approval of the minutes of the special meeting of December 1st, 2011, that the Board of Education approve the minutes of the special meeting of December 1st, 2011, moved by Mrs. Brand, seconded by Mr. Compertito. All in favor? Mrs. Kennelly, Mr. Compertito, Mr. Liu, Mrs. Gerber, Ms. Iacono, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Carey, Mrs. Brand. Opposed? Abstentions? Mr. Fattabine. Motion carries. Moving on to board reports. Just want to preface this by reminding everyone to keep your report under 2 minutes. Thank you. Ludlow's not here this evening. Ms. Teixeira from Ward.
For academics, the second marking period has begun. For extracurricular, Carol-On is on Thursday night and then Friday night during the day for the students. The Fashion Boutique Trends has opened and they are selling some fabulous items. 33 members of band, orchestra, and chorus were selected to the Western Regional High School Festival. The math team has currently finished in second place in the Fairfield County Math League out of 5 different schools. The guidance department sponsored the beginning of the post-high school planning last week. The U.S. history classes are going on a field trip on the 22nd to Newport to tour the mansions that were created in the 19th century. And the mock trial team competed in the regionals contest and did very well. For athletics, Ward football beat Ludlow on Thanksgiving Day with a score of 52-13. Winter sports have begun, and Devin Lofton, a senior on the football team, was recognized as the 5th leading rusher in the state. And that's all I have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Brand.
We had a Board of Health meeting last night, and of course, as part of that, the Health Department Director, Mr. Sands Cleary, also reported the notice that there was an initial test by AMC done at Fairfield Ludlow High School as part of the window project, and they found PCBs. And he is actually going and already scheduled to go to PTA Council in February. And it was pretty much the consensus of the people in the room, 2 of whom are pediatricians, and I think it's noteworthy that there was not any overt concerns about this issue. Okay, they didn't hit a panic button at all. The second thing is that they've also reported there are just not a lot of people reporting and getting flu shots. So what I'm going to tell people again, we are in flu season. Please get your flu shot. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Compertito.
Policy Committee hasn't met yet. We're actually trying to formalize a date where we can all make the meeting with administrations. Special Project Standing Building Committee, their main project right now is the Sherman renovation. Shovels are in the ground, foundation has been dug, central office has been moved to the media center. There is a proposal on the table to swap out some of the HVAC equipment for different HVAC equipment to gain a savings. That's been sent off to the engineer for evaluation to see if it's practical to do that. Additionally, I believe everybody got a report. They also did an environmental report at Sherman and did find some contaminants in certain areas. The building committee and the general contractor will be addressing those, and we're waiting to hear on that at the next meeting.
Thank you. Mr. Dwyer.
The CES Council does not meet in December. The next meeting is in January, so that will be the first one that I attend. I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you. Mr. Fattabine.
I'll try not to take it all, mostly. Probably won't. But the Policy Committee didn't meet. We're trying to develop a time to meet that's convenient for everyone. The Stratford Building Committee did meet. They are trying to wind down that project, which has gone on for a while now. There were a couple minor items that were discussed. They discussed adding some lockdown hardware for the doors, I believe, relocating a valve for one of the furnaces, I believe. There was a question about some towel dispensers not being uniform. They wanted uniform towel dispensers, and they were not uniform, so that made a problem in ordering supplies. So I'm sure they're going to try and do that. There was some question about a master clock. Some of the rooms didn't have the master clock is one that is accurate, I guess, in all the rooms at the same time. So they didn't have a system in all the rooms that had the same time set up for the master clock, so that was a concern. There was some concern about some sound in the main hall, and some maybe trying to alleviate that. The problem that the committee is running into is there are no real funds remaining. So some of this work, they're trying to figure out how it's going to get done. The biggest issue, though, was a discussion of what they call the final shared savings, which, since I've been recently appointed to this committee, I'm not quite sure what that is, other than the impression I got that was some sort of suggestions probably by the contractor as well as the possibly the building committee on how to save costs in completing the contract and if they're implemented, then the contractor shares with the district some cost savings, is my impression. But there was some concern as to the amount of that and how the cost sharing would be of some nature. But that was going to be referred back to the purchasing agent to further discuss and see how that's going to be resolved. So that's an open question. But that's it.
Thank you. Mrs. Gerber.
Parks and Rec is meeting tomorrow night, so I'll be going to the meeting at 7 o'clock.
Thank you. For the RTM, we are in the process of working through the committee system on the roof warranties and the both the teacher and administrator contracts. That's all I have to report on that. Mrs. Kennelly.
SEPTA will be meeting in January, so that'll be the first meeting that I'm attending. But just a word to everyone on the board, and especially all of the people in the audience, that they will be having one of their fundraisers, the cookie fundraiser, next Wednesday, where you come buy a box, fill it with cookies, which is exactly what all of us need more of at this time of year. But I'm sure they're going to be. It's not just about anybody who's available to come and buy the cookies, but that they are looking for people willing to bake. Can't make money if you don't have a product to sell, and that they would love some more participation on that. And if anybody would like the contact information for who to reach out to notify them that you would be able to do so, please just let me know.
Thanks. I don't think anyone wants my cookies. Mr. Carey.
PTA Council met on the 7th. There was quite a few questions and comments on both the school calendar from our PTA units, as well as the bullying policy, and actually there was an agreement to ask Ms. Leonardi to come present at some point before PTA Council, because there's a lot of interest. So you might be able to get some of that feedback that you're looking for there. I also put the previous meeting's minutes into Bev, so you should have had those in the packet. Board of Finance meeting, I was not able to attend, but I understand was prematurely ended by a fire alarm. And
That is correct.
a future topic that I will be reporting on is the discussion of workmen's compensation, which seems to be this year's concern for the Board of Finance. So we're moving away from insurance reserve and moving into workmen's comp deficits. And I'll let you know more when I know more.
Going on right now.
Thank you. Mr. Liu.
We had a special Board of Ed meeting that night that the Fairfield Woods Building Committee met, so I wasn't able to attend, but I believe that the minutes are in all of your packages. Thank you.
Superintendent's report. Dr. Title, you have the budget timeline.
Budget timeline, that's my only item. I put other there because I thought I might have something else and I didn't want to have to add it to the agenda. But I have an enclosure 5. Those of you that have been on the board, this will look very familiar. Those of you that are new, get ready for March Madness. So one of the changes in the budget this year is in previous years, you got the budget prior to the special meeting that's this year on the 17th. We would send it out maybe on Friday, and then that would be the beginning of it, and I would introduce it, and it was out there. This year, we've backed up the timeline, so you have more time with the budget. So at the conclusion, the last item, or probably the last item on the next board meeting, I'll actually distribute the budget, my recommended budget, and give an overview and explanation of it. So everybody has the background directly from the horse's mouth. Although referring to myself as a horse is probably not a good strategy. But you'll have that, and the public will have it, and then you'll have a full week to digest the thing, and then we'll get right into it on the 17th. There'll be no further explanation from me in terms of a presentation. So then that gives us 2 full board meetings to dig into the budget before you approve it at the second January meeting. So that's the board work, and we do have dates for the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen joint meeting. We're first with them, and the other dates are on there. And we have the dates of the RTM committee meetings already. And a quirk of the schedule this year, there's 2 weeks between the RTM meetings because there are 5 Mondays in April. And so typically they would sort of announce their intentions one week, and then next week there would be the vote. This year there's actually a break in there. So this is refrigerator magnet material for you to inform your families that you will be unavailable these nights because we really want your support out there, and I just want to review that before we launch into it.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, that's it.
Okay, old business.
Excuse me?
Oh, I'm sorry. Mrs. Brandt?
Yeah,
On the
thank
budget
you.
timeline?
Yes. Dr. Teitel, do you have any specific priorities that you're looking at as we're moving forward that are of particular concern? And, you know, I know the board members know, but I also sent Dr. Teitel things he already actually knew that I had talked about numerous times that were some of my thoughts too. And I think there's some things you actually are planning already anyway. But I didn't know if you had some priorities already set up.
Well, we're going to try to continue with all the initiatives that we started and continue to move them along, and at the same time be as fiscally responsible as possible. Deal with the increase in enrollment that we know is coming, but it's too early to know what's actually going to end up in there. Until I see the whole picture, which I don't have yet, and know what we can possibly sell. It's too early to commit to any specific initiative that might go in there. So we're obviously going to look to do improvements. As you know, one of my commitments to you and to the town has been that any commitment, any initiative that we bring forward that has a monetary cost to it, we'll do everything we can to try to offset that with savings elsewhere in the budget. And we'll hold true to that. So we'll continue to try to move the district forward, but be mindful of the fiscal constraints we're all under. But I don't want to commit to any specific initiatives because I'm not sure what we can afford at this point, and I want to be as prudent as possible.
Thank you. Just on the timeline. Mrs. Kennelly.
Just wondering, is there, and this is, I assume, not precedent for this, but ever any means by which any communication takes place at an earlier date, for example, with the RTM subcommittees? Granted, at that point, it couldn't be in a final version if it, hypothetically, if it were in January, we wouldn't have voted on it yet. If it were in February or March, or in March, we've got the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance voting on it yet. But the idea of opening up communication earlier, is there a reason for not doing that?
I don't know the answer to it. I mean, I'd love nothing more to have the RTM, the Selectmen, and the Board of Finance all in the same room, do one presentation, take all the questions, and be done with it. But evidently, that's not how we like to do things here. Let's face it. I mean, everyone in the public knows the recommended budget. The instant it comes out, it's posted on the website. Once the board adopts it, it's out and provided. If board members have ideas on formalizing and doing more communication with the other town bodies in advance of their hearing it, I'm all in favor of that. I don't see that there's an issue there. It's something for us to work out, or for you to work out collectively among the leaders in the town. We're certainly interested in that. I think the more communication with all the town bodies, the better off we all are.
Mr. Compertito. Okay. All right, thank you. I'm going to move on to the next thing. Under old business, we have an understanding on health insurance. I just want to preface this by saying this is just procedural. This is not a discussion about the MOU. We held this over from a past meeting, and we don't have time to wait for the motion. I just prefacing that. The recommended motion that the Board of Education postpone approval of the understanding on health insurance to the next board meeting, January 10th, 2012. I need a motion before we can talk about anything. Mr. Carey, and seconded by Mrs. Gerber. Mr. Liu.
Thank you. Does this, Dr. Teitel, pertain to the side agreement in some way?
Okay. I mean, I wouldn't. Remember in October, we had been working through this, a memorandum of understanding on health insurance between, I actually been working on it since March, with the Board of Finance chair, the first selectman, you remember, okay, and we had worked through several drafts of this. And we were bringing it forward, I think it was maybe the third time the board had discussed it, and the first selectman came and said he had some concerns about it, and he wished that the board would postpone action on it or then made a motion to postpone. meantime, the election happened. We had one meeting about it. The concerns are still not resolved. We're still talking. So we don't have another draft to bring forward. But because you postponed it to here, I wanted to put it on here. And I do believe that we're going to be able to get to an agreement by January. That's what it references, the agreement that would supersede the existing agreement, that whole topic, that's what it says.
I guess what concerns me is that, I understand that we did postpone it, but what I was led to believe that we were asked to postpone it as a courtesy, and now it's come up again and we're asking to postpone it again. And not to necessarily blame anybody, but it definitely coincides with the budget that you're going to bring up. And so what concerns me is that this is embedded in the budget, or are we going to be able to discuss this as separate items so that we don't necessarily have to feel tied to this as an automatic with the budget?
What we're trying, that's a good point in terms of the timing. What I've discussed with the Board of Finance Chair and the first selectman is that there's actually little disagreement on the understanding of how the board should budget for its health insurance for next year. That's not in dispute among the parties at this moment. There's other parts of it that are in dispute. So what I suggested that the first selectman do is send me a letter to that effect, and that we get the blessing of the Board of Finance for that. And so when we go forward with our budget, at least that part is clear, and everybody's on the same page about it. Of course, the board can always change that when it approves the budget, but at least to start the ball rolling, that's what we're going to do. The issues go around the timelines and this sort of thing, and the length of the agreement, and some of the other legal language. They wanted the lawyer for the town to review it, and that's where it is. So I think we're going to get our answer on, I'm going to get sufficient direction, I think, to at least get the ball rolling on budget.
Okay. Because I just think it's...
That's a fair point.
Thank you. I think it would be really unfair for us to feel like that's something that we don't have a separation in order to go forward if we feel that's something we need to do.
I agree, great question. Yes?
Since we have actually practically a half brand-new board, could we please have, at least in our Friday packet before the January 10th, a financial report on this account? So, you know, we know where we start, we know how much we allocate, we know how much we close out and how much we use during the year. I think it would be helpful for board members then to go in more informed if they're going to look at this and make a decision.
Thank you.
Yeah, actually, we'll need to do that to formulate the budget, but you'll be getting the budget on January 10th, so as part of that whole package, you'll necessarily see the whole picture of the fund.
Okay. Any public comment on the motion to postpone this item until January 10th? Seeing none, all in favor? It's unanimous. Item B, approval of the music curriculum's grades K through 5. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the music curriculum grades K through 5. Moved by Mr. Compertito, seconded by Mrs. Brand. Is there any board discussion? Mrs. Kennelly.
First, I'd just like to commend all of the people involved in the creation of the curriculum. I can assure everyone that whatever time they were professionally allotted to get this done, that it took far more time than that. That's just the nature of curriculum review. I do have two basic concerns about the curriculum, one of which I certainly want to be on the record for. The other one would be something I wish were included in the curriculum. The first is the issue of space. We have teachers who are being assessed on the curriculum that they deliver, and looking over the facilities plan, I actually went through and counted. And for the elementary schools, 8 of the 11 elementary schools have inadequate space, specifically with regard to music, according to that facilities plan. It's short 1.0 space for band. For what's designated as music classroom, it's short 4.5 in terms of classroom space. For instrumental music, it's short 6.0. Over the course of these 8 schools. And yet all of the schools are being given this curriculum, expected to follow it, teachers accordingly assessed based on this curriculum, and yet it is clearly not equitable. And it's just, it's unfortunate. It's certainly not the fault of the curriculum that this exists. But there's, you know, I would certainly hope it would never come up as an issue with teacher assessment that one teacher could deliver aspects of the curriculum that another couldn't. I mean, there are requirements for creative dance, folk dance, classical, percussion instrument use. And there are going to be some schools, but that just simply can't be offered in the same way that it's offered in another school. And so I just really wanted to be on the record as, you know, acknowledging that for our teachers. The second issue was one I brought up last at the meeting when it was presented, and that I genuinely feel that it is a missing point in the curriculum, that there is nothing specific regarding content. There are mentions made, and I made notes of some of the specifics. You know, connections among music and the other arts, that they are making connections between music and other discipline, musical genres and styles. One of the essential questions in the 5th grade curriculum is, how does music, history, and culture influence each other? Yet at no point is it stipulated which that they focus on. Within the 4th grade curriculum, the focus on folk music. We know that I believe the American Revolutionary War, Civil War is part of that 4th grade curriculum. I would have thought that would be a natural place to put in American folk music as a case in point. And I really wish that had been a part of this curriculum.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, I'm sorry. No, go ahead, Mr. Dwyer. I didn't see your hand.
Not specifically with this curriculum, but Dr. Title mentioned that whenever a new initiative comes out, should there be, how are we going to pay for that? And I'm wondering if this document would have been made stronger if there was a section saying, answering the question, are there cost implications? Is there a fiscal note related to the delivering of this curriculum? Some of the costs associated with meeting the standards that are within our capital plan relative to separate space. At the last meeting, there was a conversation about there's limited supplies or equipment that will be needed to deliver this curriculum, but no comment made about is there any staffing changes required. So I'm wondering if going forward there could be a paragraph attached to each curriculum document that more or less says what's the potential fiscal impact. I'm not talking about a full-blown cost analysis, but just kind of an overview.
Good point. And I just want to say, Mrs. Kennelly, I wholeheartedly agree on the space issue. It's frustrating. It's extremely frustrating, and unfortunately it's just a problem throughout the district. To shove 90 students into a portable for chorus is unconscionable, to say the least, but unfortunately we are where we are with space. Is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on this item at this time? Seeing none, is the board prepared to vote? All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. The next item is approval of educational specifications for Riverfield Elementary School extension/alterations. The recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the educational specifications for Riverfield Elementary School extension alterations. May I have a motion? Moved by Mr. Carey, seconded by Mrs. Brand. Is there any board discussion? Mrs. Brand.
I actually reached out to a couple of building committee chairs who have done this and have been in the trenches, if you will. One of the things that I think they recommended is put a cover letter on the front of this explaining that our estimates are a cursory estimate. They're a site but without a whole lot of evaluation of the site, and I think that would be very helpful. The second thing is I look at the scope of this, and there's no question in my mind that everything that's here is needed. But I think it might be helpful for a building committee, if their funding is not adequate, if we were able to prioritize what we think is most important, so that, again, they're not coming back. We know what we have in here is important, but not all of them are equal. And I don't want to have a building committee find they have an add alternate list, and one of the board's top priorities is sitting on the add alternate list. And finally, there is a piece to this that I think needs to be amended. It's on page 11. It's under the code, and it's bullet number 3. I'll wait till you get there. I went to a PTA meeting today at Fairfield Ludlow High School, and Mr. Cullen and Karen Parks were there. And Mr. Cullen was addressing the members concerning the PCBs and how that will be managed. And unless I misunderstood him, there are times where actually encapsulation may be appropriate. So what we have in our ed specs is in contradiction to that practice.
You said you're on page 11?
Unless I counted the wrong page. It's
Oh, under code, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I apologize. I was up on envelope.
That's okay. But my point is that we're prescribing something that may not actually be the best practice. So as an alternate, I would offer a friendly amendment to the document to have 1, a cover letter, 2, if the board agrees, priorities, and 3, to change that bullet to just make sure that the building is in full compliance with federal and state hazardous regulations.
That's 3 amendments.
Right, well, we can do them all as one if you wish, or I can separate them, whichever you prefer.
I would separate them. If you'd
Okay.
like to make a motion on the, you
Like
can
to have
just
a
go
mo-
ahead and start to do that.
Okay, no, yeah, to do a motion to include a cover letter with the explanation that this is a very rough estimate when we do this. We haven't done any site work, and I think that should be the expectation.
Is there a second? Mr. Liu, is there any discussion? Mr. Fattabine?
Do we have a written estimate? I mean, do we know what, we got
Yes.
verbally, last meeting, we got an estimate. Verbally, I thought. I didn't see any written.
Yeah, he has a written estimate, but it's not generally part of the ed specs.
Well, I don't even know what it is. So I don't know how I can suggest doing a cover letter that it's only an estimate when I don't know what that estimate is.
And one of the reasons for that is that depending on what the disposition of the roof life extension project is, will determine that estimate. So the board cannot forward an estimate till we have a determination from the RTM, because if the roof life extension project is approved, we don't need to include replacement of that section of the roof. If the roof life extension project is not approved, then we'll need to add funds for that project. So these ed specs need to go over to the Board of Selectmen so we can get a building committee.
Right.
That's the point. And the longer we take on this, the longer it goes. So we don't have an estimate for that reason. If you want to hold this up until we get an estimate, then so be it.
There is no estimate in here, just to be clear. If we send these over, I won't vote in favor of this amendment because there's no dollar amount in here anyway. Mr. Carey?
Maybe I'm confused, but as someone who's seen 4 or 5 major projects now, either in the crowd or up here, this document, my understanding is the form and fit of what we're looking for. This isn't our sales pitch, which is the facilities plan. So, and again, my understanding is that this document is basically educationally what we need to be built for us, and most of this is technical requirements that make sure that we get our refund from the state BSF. So historically, and I understand the Board of Selectmen has asked for these sooner, historically, this document has been produced until money's been funded for an architect at a building committee. And the architect takes this document from us and calculates the actual cost of the project. Obviously, we have an estimate, and we've had an architect do a 100,000 or a million-foot estimate for us to try to make that more accurate. And I understand the concern that Mrs. Brandt has, because we end up in the, this is how much this costs versus that cost game. But this document isn't about selling the project. This document is about what we educationally need at Riverfield School. And I'm not certain that mixing price in there has anything to do with it. It has to do with how big classrooms are, what the safety requirements are, what the code is that has to be incorporated into this building. So I'm not certain that a cover letter on this document with a price would meet its requirement.
Mr. Liu and then Mrs. Brand.
We all, I think, want this. I might be speaking out of turn here, but I think all of us want this to go forward. So these questions, at least from my point of view, they're not about trying to slow it down or not trying to get it before the Board of Selectmen and to try to slow down the process. It's trying to understand some of the procedural things and where we've also done things in the past. Mr. Carey, you'd said the word historically, and so just refresh my memory, because I'm just going to pretend I don't know how we've done this before, but haven't we, with the ed specs, also given an estimate? And let's leave off the extra $2 million for the roof. Haven't we always had that as part of the process, that when it goes before them, they have an estimate, they know what they're sort of expecting? And even though we are trying to clarify now, trying to say, look, this is still an estimate, there's going to be some leeway in here, don't we always put those numbers forward?
If you want me to answer that, I'll be happy to.
I just want to state what is in this document. We'll be sending over a cover letter that says enclosed, Dr. Title, correct me if I'm wrong, are the educational specifications for Riverfield School. Nowhere in this document are there numbers or an estimate. I think your cover letter would be pertinent to the facilities plan that has numbers in it. As germane to the educational specification, there is no number in here that needs to be addressed. Mrs. Brand.
Here's the problem. I heard Dr. Title, thank you. Where I'm going with this is that number 9 to 11 million was here at this table, was brought to this board's attention as to what this site could cost. And we were even asking questions relative to the ed specs, whether these things could be done for that cost and what the roof impact would have on that. Further, we're considering remediation issues. My point is, the community has a number in their head. We have a number in our head because we need to have that in order to take that into account with the spectrum of the facility plan.
Right.
Because if this project ends up being a lot more expensive than what we anticipate, we won't have a facility plan because we won't be able to spend any money on anything else. So my point is I think my point was, this is a disclaimer. We have an estimate. It's a very cursory one. It's referenced in our facility long-range plan, but it does not mean that it is an inaccurate representation of what this project will cost.
I understand.
That's what I think the distinction needs to be.
Thank you. I understand that, but that's not germane to the educational specifications. Anything else just on this particular amendment to the motion?
Yeah, I would respectfully request that you withdraw the motion, and I'll tell you why. Having served on the other side of these committees, this board always gets a bad name by putting a price tag on something, okay? And I think in order for us to do this properly, and I think it's an opportunity for us to do it properly, is First Selectman has requested an ed spec to put together a building committee and let the, and basically what we're saying is we want Riverfield renovated to a 504, okay? That's basically what this document says. Let them say what it's going to take to do that, and let them go for the funding to say, this is what it's done, we've talked to estimators, or we've talked to architects, and this is what it's going to be. But I don't want to be sitting here in a position saying it's 9 to 11 million when it could be 15 million, all right? We don't have the resources to determine that, and that's, in my opinion, that is the role of a building committee, okay? And we have usurped that role and done ourselves a disfavor by putting a price tag on something. We should simply put out, this is what we need, we're going to have 500 kids there in 3 years, or whatever that timeline is. We need a 504. Help us out. You're the building committee, that's what their role is, and that's my feeling on it.
Thank you. Anybody else who hasn't spoken on the issue? I'm going to take Mr. Dwyer.
I support Mr. Compertito's approach. I think it's too early to put a number down.
I'll take public comment.
Excuse me, actually, he offered if I would be willing to do a friendly amendment to remove it.
Sure.
Yeah, I will be happy to do it. I don't think any of us have anything different than the agenda here. I just want to be very clear that we're making a distinction of what's in our long-range facility plan that does have a number that we had a presentation on and that this does not.
I understand what you're saying. I think they're two
So
separate
I'll be
issues.
happy to remove the motion.
Is that okay with the seconder, Mr. Liu? Yes. Okay, thank you. We have another motion coming. Thank you.
That is about the priorities here. What happens when we do ed specifications and they go out, building committees build and do an estimate based on the total, exactly what we'd want them to do. However, they may not get funding that is to that, and then they will have to come back and amend what we have as priorities. If we do have some priorities already, it might speed up the process a bit so they don't get waylaid. They'll still have to come back with very specifics. But I think if we have some priorities, and I know for me, the health, safety, the conditions in the building, and the lunch line.
Do you have a motion?
Yeah, the motion is to set priorities to accompany this document.
Is there a second? Mr. Liu, is there any discussion? I will just offer up that I think that the document itself is our priority. I will not vote in favor of this. Any other discussion? Mr. Liu?
Yeah, I mean, I seconded it because I'd like people to want to discuss it and talk about it. I actually don't know if I agree with that. I think when we're dealing with something at this beginning point, we want to say we want it all. And I don't mean to be selfish in that matter, because I really respect the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, the RTM, in terms of how they're going to pull this apart to look at it to see if they can really afford this. But I think it's our job at the beginning point to say we need it all, and there aren't any priorities except for excellence. At a certain point down the road, if we really, 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 really feel that we are at logger jams and we cannot work out something, then it might be time to deal with priorities. But I did want to second it so that we could discuss it if there's anybody who wanted to talk about it.
Thank you. Is there any, I'm sorry, Mr. Fatterby.
I just want to say I agree with Mr. Liu. I think that now is not the time to set priorities. We may not have to set priorities if the town gets fully funded. If the town fully funds us, we don't know what the cost is going to be. I don't know what the cost is going to be. I heard a verbal estimate. I don't know how accurate that estimate is. I don't know what the actual cost is going to be. So it may get funded, in which case you don't have to go through the work and effort to set priorities. And I would, like in the past, what happens if the funding is not there, you have to amend the ed specs anyway to in essence, come within the funding that is being appropriated. So I would not take on that effort at this time because it may or may not be necessary.
Okay. Public comment on the amendment only. Seeing none, is the board prepared to vote? All in favor of setting priorities within the document? Only on the amendment. On the amendment to set priorities. Yes. No problem. Okay. All in favor? Mrs. Brand, all opposed? Mr. Carey, Mr. Fatterbean, Mr. Dwyer, Ms. Iacono, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Liu, and Mrs. Kennelly. Any abstentions? Mr. Compertito, how are you voting? Okay.
And we
One
have-
in favor, 8 opposed.
We have one last one, which is the code issue.
And your motion is?
To amend it, wait. Instead, what we have written is very prescribed. I would cite to be in full compliance with state and federal hazardous materials regulations.
Is there a second? Mrs. Kennelly. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Kennelly and then Mr. Compertito.
Just to clarify the wording of the amendment, is it, as it's worded here, abate any hazardous material encapsulation is not acceptable? Is it simply reducing it to abate any hazardous material and the means by which it's done?
No, actually, because there are a number of different ways to handle the way we handle lead, the way we handle PCBs, the way we handle asbestos may be different given the circumstances. So what I'm doing is saying instead of prescribing exactly that we will not do one or the other, we may need a myriad of these, and if I'm wrong, please, Mr. Cullen, chime in, but this allows the building committee to handle it as in full compliance with the regulations.
Mr. Compertito?
My only comment is this document is designed for the Connecticut Building and Schools system, and is that a requirement? I guess I would ask that through the chair.
I think we're okay with this. If we say abate any hazardous material in accordance with state and federal regulations, that will cover us.
Okay.
If that's in the spirit of the amendment,
I'm fine.
Okay.
Because.
in terms
but
of the wording.
Dr. Title, if I'm not mistaken, and Mr. Cullen, please help me here, but I don't know that we need to even abate some of these. That's my concern here. And that's why I want to leave it open. For instance, the lead paint, when it's intact, you don't abate it. With the PCBs, if they've leached into a structural building, you don't abate it. That's why I want to leave this open.
Do we need the word abatement? You want to get rid of the word abatement? Is that
Yeah,
what I'm
because I think
understanding?
it's the same thing. I want to keep it.
That's fine. Okay. I'm getting nods of the head from administration. Mr. Dwyer and then Mr. Carey.
Yeah, the only point I think I would make is that when you're doing a major project, to say that you'll meet the, I'll say, the minimum requirements of encapsulation, and then 4 years from now, you're doing some renovation there, the environmental standards have grown exponentially, and you suddenly say, boy, we should have taken this out when we had a chance. So I'm not opposed to having a stricter standard within the building specifications, because I think in the long run, that would work to our advantage.
If you had the word, if it said, abate in accordance with the state and federal regulation, if the state and federal regulation didn't require abatement, then you wouldn't necessarily
Oh,
have
all
to
right.
do it.
I'm with you.
So I think that gives you the flexibility to go either way, depending on
That's
the
fine.
situation.
I'm agreeable to that.
Okay. Mr. Carey?
Through the chair to Dr. Titler's team, is there a reason why encapsulation is not acceptable has been designated by our team? Is there anything we're missing here in terms of a pitfall that we're going to be walking into if we pull this verbiage out?
I'm now at my limit on this.
Did good up to this point.
I know. You gotta know when to stop.
The point with this message was that we didn't want to leave it up to the contractor to decide when he ran into hazardous material to make his own decision to encapsulate it or remove it. The point that Mrs. Brand was trying to make is there are times when there's hazardous material on structural members in a building, and the state wouldn't expect you to rip out structural members and reconfigure the system in a school building. That's a case where they would allow you to encapsulate it and seal it and then just make a record of it with the state.
I have a question. So our standard as it's written is, would that then be considered a higher standard than just simply stating
Yes.
the motion as amended?
Yes.
So as it's written, we have a higher standard
Yes, because
currently?
you generally see in educational facilities, a lot of contractors take the low road and leave things in place. They'll leave pipes that they abandon in place. They don't demolish them all the way, things like that.
If I can follow up on that,
Sure, Mr. Carey.
Madam Chairman. So, as I understand it, we hand this document to the town builds our building for us. Then we get it back, but you and your team have to deal with tools for schools, requirements, and all the state regulations to ensure our children are safe. So if I'm hearing you correctly, this particular addition to this sentence gives you some positive control to make sure that we're not going to get into a pitfall, or...
Oh, I think
I guess really where I'm going with this, Mr. Cullen, is I just want to make sure we're not taking out something that's going to leave us with a problem after spending millions of dollars.
no, it shouldn't.
But the standard is higher if we leave the wording the way that it is.
Correct, and the state's involved with it. There's mandates on what you have to remove, what's mandatory when they see the levels that we get through the testing, and there's other times they'll find it acceptable to encapsulate or leave.
I'd be more comfortable with the higher standard.
I think, yeah, if I may, one of the things that came up today was with what you're referring to, is that could actually mean if we have PCBs leach into a load-bearing wall or go to remove the windows, what can actually happen, you would actually end up tearing down your whole building. And it wouldn't necessarily be any more environmentally safe than it was before. But what you would be doing was be mandating that because of the stipulation here. And what I'm saying is that isn't necessarily the best thing to do on a site. And it would, Mr. Cullen gave in, for instance, I think it was about the windows and if it leached into the brick, rather the structure. So you could end up with a window project, for instance, that would be an enormous building project. And that's why, I think what you need to consider is, I don't disagree with you. I'm a mom. There's no, and a nurse, and there's no way I would ever put anyone, I agree with you, I'd want the highest standard. But I also know that sometimes that higher standard means you have to leave it alone. It's actually better. And that's where I'm going with this.
Mr. Carey?
Just to that point, are we better served by leaving this language here and having the contractor come back to us and asking us to change it and giving that option to our construction team? Or do we want to cede that now in advance?
Is that a question?
I'm
or
asking,
food
that's
for
a
thought?
question for the board. I mean,
Right.
if the administration wants to answer it. In other words, if we have to, Mrs. Brand makes an excellent point, that if something's leached into a structural and we have to start tearing the side of a building down, I'm assuming someone's going to come to us and ask us to change the ed spec before they do that. Is it prudent just to change it now, or do we want to have some level of positive control over that by asking them to come and ask us?
I believe Mr. Dwyer wanted to comment on that.
I don't think that you put a standard in and say, oh, we want to make it a higher standard. I think you can always say, you're carrying it to the extreme, so we're willing to lower it in this instance. So I would rather say, start with the higher standard and let them come back to us and let us form a judgment when we see the specific instance, or when the building committee sees the specific instance.
I would agree. Anybody else on this issue, and then I'm going to go to the public.
No, actually, if you don't mind, do you think that will work, Mr. Cullen?
Yes.
Okay,
That's a
then I'll
very good
withdraw the
approach.
motion.
Okay, thank you,
If that's
Mrs.
okay.
Brand.
Do we have a seconder? Who was it?
Is that okay with this second? Okay, great. Are there any other motions, any other amendments? Excellent. Oh, Mr. Fatterby.
Possible, one clarification, I guess.
Sure.
Last time we discussed this, I had mentioned something on page 6 with respect to the homerooms, classrooms. On one of the bullet points, where it indicates what's going to be in these homerooms and classrooms, and one is water fountains. So I guess, is that should or should not be in there in your opinion? And if it shouldn't be in there, I would move to take out water fountains being in the homeroom classrooms for grades K through 5. Do you recollect what I'm referring to?
Yes, I do.
And my understanding of when I mentioned that at our prior meeting, you indicated, well, the intent was not to have water fountains in every classroom.
Right. I mean, it depends, I guess, where you want to put that section. We definitely want to specify that we need water fountains.
Right.
The fact that it fell under this homeroom classroom section, I mean, we can always move that to a support service area.
Well, I'm concerned is
back.
the interpretation is going to be that you don't need a water fountain in every classroom.
No.
So that's my point, is it could be confusing to whoever reads the ed spec who's going to bid it.
Do you want to offer a motion to correct that so that we can, an amendment? You can move it to common core spaces. You could put together an amendment to move it to common core spaces.
If that's where Mr. Cullen believes it should be.
Just a question, under interior spaces, it says drinking fountains update to ADA throughout. Is it sufficient that it's listed there and that it doesn't need to be listed under the classrooms?
Mr. Cullen, does that...
On page 12.
Mr. Cullen, does that suffice?
Just checking common spaces. Just give me a minute.
Fourth bullet up from the bottom.
Yeah, that is good.
All right, so can we just have a
It probably
friendly
got moved
amendment
around
to
in the document.
take out the word water fountain under homeroom? All right. Is that a form, what was the motion exactly?
To strike water fountains on page 6 under homeroom classrooms for grades K through 5.
Okay, seconded by Mr. Dwyer. Any discussion? Any comments from the public just on the water fountain amendment? Seeing none.
We'll get the calendar, folks.
How? All in favor? That's unanimous. All right, back to the main motion. As Mr. Compertito.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Under music curriculum, page 7. Calling for one general music room, I assume that's a chorus room. Electronics, 2 smaller rooms for lessons, or what I would call a band compatible. Separate lessons. My question is, why do we need bullet number 3 if we have instructional rooms, and why do we need a practice space and an additional office? I don't see that on the Burr spec or McKinley and so forth, and want to make sure we're being consistent across the board.
I can't answer that, but I would talk with the principal on that, heavily involved with this. Why that was added.
Mr. Tueso? You want, come to the microphone. Just introduce yourself for the record, thank you.
Paul Tueso, principal of Riverside.
Thank you, welcome.
There are times when we need to secure instruments and lock them, larger things that don't go transported back and forth. So we were looking for a space to do that within the new facility.
I understand the need for lockable storage space for instruments. This calls for lockable storage space plus an office plus a small practice area. I mean, if we want to say lockable, securable space for instruments, that's fine. But those 2 additional things, I think, I would move to strike.
Is there a second? Canali, is there any discussion?
Can I just get a clarification of which one needs striking?
Yep.
Under music, bullet number 3, I would strike that and just say provide adequate lockable storage space for instruments.
Is that bullet 4?
Bullet 3.
I know,
Or,
but bullet
well,
4,
I mean,
what you...
we have an instrument storage room, so I would eliminate bullet 3.
But we need the office space for the teaching staff, though, John, right? You're just talking about the small practice space. Is that what you're talking
Why
about?
is there a separate office space for teaching staff? Don't they have a desk in the chorus room and in the band room? I mean, that's how the other music programs that I'm looking at are dealing with that.
I believe the music room at McKinley School, there is a general music room, there is an instrumental music room, and in between is an office space that is lockable.
Yeah, you're right.
My question is that necessary?
Well, we're hearing from the principal of the school building that it is necessary. So I would not vote in favor of this amendment. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment on this amendment?
Question, through the chair to Mr. Tueso, is that room sometime used for the small group instruction?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Any further discussion from the board? Public comment on this item to remove this bullet point? Okay. Seeing none, back to the board. All in favor? Well, technically no, because there was no public comment. There was no public comment. All in favor? Mrs. Canelli, Mr. Compertito. All opposed? Mr. Liu, Mrs. Gerber, Mrs. Iacono, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Perry, and Mrs. Brand. Motion fails. Back to the
Just
main
a
motion.
second. I don't know if anyone else can hear this, but I keep hearing background noise in
Yeah,
the
there's
sound
like
system.
a static noise on the microphone.
Oh, okay. Do we know what microphone is causing it? What I'm asking is,
No.
I don't know if everyone can hear everything that's going on with all of that going on in the back.
It's not. It's coming out of one speaker.
Oh,
Okay.
Thank you. I
Okay.
apologize. I just wanted to see if we were on.
All right, we are back to the main motion. Mrs. Canelli.
2 questions. One, under science regarding the prep room. The one ed specs I got as by way of comparison, Stratfield's did not mention a prep room for science, so I'm questioning that inclusion. Secondly, I'm questioning under special education. Those are 7 rooms, which I sought clarification for and was told that, yes, indeed, they are asking for 7 rooms for special education, and I'm questioning that need. And I don't have a basis for knowing it's not necessary, but questioning it all the same.
I understand the prep room for the science room for the Stratfield Ed spec was just missed. It is something that we
Don't get hurt. We're running good
do
insurance
ask
right
for.
now.
504 school setup.
Sure, yeah. Typically, in an elementary school, we have anywhere from 3 to 4 special education teachers. These spaces are not full-size classrooms. They're going to be smaller classrooms where they could take 6 to 8 students, so it's small group instruction. So you'll have anywhere from 3 to 4 special education teachers running small group pull-out. At times they push in to provide that instruction. We do have up to 2 speech and language specialists typically at a building. They'll need separate spaces. Again, they're smaller spaces. They're not full-size classrooms. Those smaller spaces would allow anywhere from 3 to 6 students to be served. Sometimes they're occurring at the same time, so a shared space can be difficult. And then OT-PT definitely needs their own space. Again, not a full-size classroom, but smaller.
But if 3 to 4, Chair, if 3 to 4 teachers are working at a time, why do we need 7? I definitely understand that, that for the OT and the PT, that has to be, there's customization there in terms of what they need for the work that they do. But I know that no one's working in anyone's school full-time generally, why would they need 7 spaces?
The special ed teachers are full-time.
No, at one school.
At a school.
So there could be at one point, that's, I guess, what I was trying to find out, is that are there at one point in time 7 full-time?
I think Riverfield's allocation currently is 3.0. Right, so they currently have 3.0 full-time teachers, special ed.
So I come back to, why do we need 7 rooms?
Special ed and related services. So you have to look at not just special education teachers, but speech and language pathologists. And when you're working with speech and language pathologists, there may be more than one person at the building at the same time. So you need 2 small spaces at least for them to run 2 groups simultaneously. Sure. So in this configuration, 4 rooms are slated for special education teaching, direct instruction by a special educator, 2 spaces for speech and language pathology, and 1 space for OT-PT. That's the 7. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, are we prepared to go to public comment on the main motion as amended? Thank you. Public comment. Anybody who wants to speak in favor of approving the Riverfield educational specifications as amended, now is the time. Or not. Okay, great. Thank you. Is the board prepared to vote? Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Miska, I'm sorry.
It's a long walk around the room. Suzanne Miska, 123 Rygate Road. Although I'd like to stand here and say that I'm in favor of these beautiful ed specs, I can't. Because at the same time that we're discussing we don't want to put a dollar amount on this building that has already hit the paper, could be anywhere from $9 to $11 million depending on roof. We're also hearing that we might need $9 to $11 million on a roof on Ward. We want to redo windows at Ludlow and add maybe an addition over there. There's only so much that we can do. I think this is lovely. This is everyone's wish list for the perfect school. But I caution that we can't keep throwing these kinds of wish lists out when you're sitting here and telling me that you're going to be fiscally responsible with your budget. Do we need a bigger office? No offense, Principal Tueso, do we need a bigger principal's office? Do we need it? You're asking now for an additional secretary to fill these spots? I don't understand how you can continue to create these building requirements and just keep asking for more and more and more. The public eventually gets to a point and says, we'll give you the minimum, but you can't keep asking us taxpayers to keep paying for this. We can't. And at what cost? So that when we go to an RTM meeting, I'm going to have to hear how we lose another $1 million or $2 million, and we're all going to be sitting back here fighting for pay to play and everything else. I think this has to be more fiscally responsible. I think this is a beautiful idea. My child went to Riverfield School. It's not easy for me to stand here, but I can't do this and hear Ludlow's on the wing. Ward is in dire need of a roof. It's leaking. Kids are sick over there. You can't do this. I'm sorry. I can't say that this is something I would want to see you all approve. Thank you.
Anyone else? Comment from the board. All in favor on the motion as amended? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is approval of the student calendar. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the 2012-2013 student calendar as proposed. May I have a motion? Mr. Compertito, seconded by Mrs. Gerber. Board discussion. You can. I don't know if you want to deal with the board rap. There's no discussion? Mr. Compertito.
Yes, I would like to propose several changes to the schedule, and I will do them as individual amendments for clarity purposes. November 12th, 2012, Veterans Day. Veterans Day falls on the 11th. Motion. I'm sorry, yes. Is that better? November 12th, 2012. It's marked on the calendar as Veterans Day. Veterans Day falls on the 11th. I understand it's observed on the Monday. I would make a motion that we eliminate Veterans Day. And Dr. Keitel, thank you for providing us with the comparison to the other schools' systems, which correct, the majority of school systems do no longer honor Veterans Day as a day off. They honor it as an in-school issue, so I would make that motion.
Is there a second? Mrs. Kennelly? Okay. Is there discussion on eliminating Veterans Day as a day off from school? Mr. Dwyer?
Only one point of information is that the calendar all works together. Are we well served to kind of deal with each issue one motion at a time, rather than saying what is the total suggested changes that any of us might have? That's one question. Number two, I'm not all that in favor of changing the current policy of...
I will not vote in favor of this motion. Very important that we have Veterans Day off. I think if we offend even one veteran by holding school on this day, then that's one veteran too many. For anybody who's willing to lie down and die for our country, I think we can stay home from school on this day. Ms. Kennelly.
I spoke to veterans about this issue, and they were in complete agreement that having kids sleep in, have multiple hours in their day extra for texting, perhaps a trip to the mall, in no way served to recognize the service they had done to our country. Our schools have the opportunity and take the opportunity to teach our students, and every once in a while they actually do a really good job. And this is a scenario where, based upon how we model a practice through implicit instruction and through explicit instruction, we have the chance to teach our children exactly the value of veterans. And they will learn, in this case by modeling, that they will know growing up, they will know upon leaving our school system, that the day of Veterans Day was a day for recognition. That is the habit that we would be instilling in them by having them come to school on Veterans Day. That's basic modeling. They would be learning the explicit direction and the explicit instruction that it was important what they were doing, that the schools thought it was important that they come in on that day, and that they were, I mean, across the board, it's, having been to some of the assemblies on this, the veterans who come in and speak, the students really make such a phenomenal connection with them on a day that's not Veterans Day. And to do it on Veterans Day is teaching the students this is the day that we're recognizing them. We're in a culture now where increasingly families have no one in the military. With no draft, we're going to have generation after generation that have no connection with it, and they're only learning by this instruction. Memorial Day, the town takes care of it. There's no one in town who can miss the recognition offered to the military on that day. Between the parade and all of the activities, it's well recognized. When Woodrow Wilson started this, he said the reflections of this day, at the time called Armistice Day, will be filled with solemn pride in the heroism of those who died in the country's service and with gratitude for the victory, both because of the thing from which it has freed us and because of the opportunity it has given America to show her sympathy with peace and justice in the councils of the nation. I come back to that, the reflections of that day filled with solemn pride and heroism. When a student is sleeping in and enjoying a day off, we are not teaching this fundamental lesson, which is the reason that the holiday exists. And therefore, we are doing a disservice in education. We're not educating students about this.
Thank you, Mr. Liu.
I understand your passion on that, but I do think it's more than just all or nothing. I do think there are some people who do celebrate it, and I think we do in the schools. Even though we have this last year, we had Veterans Day off, did we not? And our school completely learned and participated in a Veterans Day celebration, even though they had the day off. So they were learning about it, and it was an amazing event that I attended. I do think there does need to be some respect for the veterans, and taking the day off is for those in a free country, for those who choose to exercise it, it's there for them, and I think I would be in favor of leaving it as is.
Mr. Fatterbean?
Veterans Day is a federal holiday. I guess, does the administration know offhand of any other federal holiday in which the school is in session? Columbus Day?
I don't know if it is or not. We're permitted by state statute to hold school on any federal or state holiday other than those that fall in December and January. So it's permissible to have school on Veterans Day if the board so chooses.
Yes, one of my concerns would be that because it's a federal holiday, there's sort of a presumption that it should be a holiday. One of my concerns is we should set some sort of standard policy such that we don't pick and choose among what's an important holiday for each of us, in essence. Some people like Veterans Day as an important special holiday. Some people like Columbus Day. I'm not even certain if Columbus Day is a federal holiday. But I think we have to be cautious in the picking, just because what the holiday is. It's in my opinion, it's difficult and problematic unless you have some other criteria, because you're going to get people's opinions as to what is important for them, and some holidays will take off. Some holidays that don't have the impetus or voice behind it, we may not take off. And I'm not sure in this sense where I would lie yet, but I'd like to take some rationale other than Veterans Day can be in school versus a holiday, and maybe some rationale as to why federal holidays aren't necessarily be taken for school, and some other rationale other than the day itself, because we're going to be faced with these issues on what days to take off and not take off. And I thought I'm sort of looking for some other criteria.
Mr. Carey? And then Mrs. Gerber.
Yeah, just briefly, I will not support this motion. I can understand there's passions on both sides about it, but I think this is too important a day not to have as a holiday. I do agree with Mr. Liu that I think all of our schools do a good job in highlighting the importance of the day, and we have a pretty good wind-up to it. And I can tell you personally, through after-school activities like our Cub Scout and Boy Scout pack at my children's school, there's quite a focus on Veterans Day and connectivity to veterans. To suggest that all our parents' children in the district are out sleeping late and just texting, I think it would not be accurate. I have greater faith in the parenting skills, and certainly hope that some of this will be taking place at home, and that we're not completely reliant on the schools to teach the values of service in our community.
Mrs. Gerber, and then I see Selectman Walsh.
Well, one thing one thing I noticed, because it is on a Sunday, and I went to a lot of different websites, and it appears as if, and I don't know actually for our town itself, so I don't know if anyone knows that, because I tried to find out, most of the commemoration ceremonies are taking place on Veterans Day itself, which is on a Sunday this coming year. So that, to me, is kind of the crux of why I would support having school on the 12th, is because if all the commemoration ceremonies are on the 11th, then why would we not have the children in school on the 12th? That was my rationale for supporting getting rid of Veterans Day for this 1 year, because Veterans Day itself is on a Sunday. Next year, when it's on a Monday, I would not support having school on that day. So that's my decision.
It's Brandon, then Selectman Walsh.
I don't think, listening to anyone here, that I'd like to think that everyone wants to honor our veterans. I don't think it's a day off, or we stay in school, that it is any less of a reflection of how we regard veterans. I actually agree with Mrs. Kennelly. I think we do a greater service when we teach them in school and bring the veterans in. I think it's a huge impact. I'd like to think, as Mr. Carey says, that, we have a lot of our students participating during Veterans Day, but my sense is that we don't. So, to me, if we really, the whole point of this is honoring and teaching and reminding them the value and how to respect it and the sacrifice that was made, I think that that day that we teach it in school has much longer lasting and greater impact than taking the day off. So I will support this. But I do not see either approach as being any less.
Selectman Walsh.
Good evening. I vehemently oppose this motion. If anything, our veterans in this town should be more honored than they are. I just attended our veterans ceremony a little over a month ago. Speaking to many of the veterans in this town who were present, what came across loud and clear is that they wished that more young people were present at the ceremony. They wished that our music programs from our high schools and our junior high schools that are so good were present at their ceremonies. And that's where the focus should be. It should not be trying to take away a holiday from them, one that they have fought with this district over in the not-too-distant future when it was taken away from them, and continue to fight for until it was put back on this calendar, and now have it taken away from them again, and them have to come and start groveling back for their holiday back. They have given to this country. They have dedicated their lives to this country. Giving them a day to honor them, and our students a day to honor them, I don't think is too much to ask. I understand that this year it falls on a Sunday, but the federal government and the state of Connecticut are both recognizing it on a Monday. The reason for that is to honor them, to give them a day, an entire day, for this nation to honor them. I think that at the least there should be a motion to postpone this, to allow the veterans groups to attend your meeting and to express their feelings. On your agenda, it talks about talking about a calendar. It does not say that we're here to talk about Veterans Day. So if you want to be honest with the veterans, put it down specifically for an agenda item for them to come, for the public to come, for the students to come who can air their point of view. If nothing else, they deserve that. And that's all I got to say. I can't believe we've gotten to this point in time where they fought so hard to get this holiday back, and now we're trying to rip it away from them again. I ask that you all turn this motion down. Thank you.
Any further comment from the board on this motion and this motion only? Oh, no, we're not on public comment. Selectman Walsh is an ex officio to our board. Mr. Liu, Mrs. Cannelli, and then Mr. Fadby.
Just to be fair to Mr. Compertito, I mean, and I'm not in favor of letting this day go, but we had it on the calendar on the agenda to look at the calendar. No one had brought that up before, so it wasn't like it was a surprise. You brought it up because you thought it was an idea. It wasn't trying to not give the veterans the opportunity to not sound off.
Just on the amendment only, Mrs. Cannelli.
I would disagree with the characterization in any size, shape, or form that reporting to school on this day would in any way show disrespect to the veterans. I come from generations of veterans, and I spoke to several of them on both sides of my family. And both of them are aware of that whole notion that increasingly the younger generations are more and more divorced from the idea of what this service means to our country because they're not being called upon to do it. And it is a day off. And in fact, Mr. Walsh, in many ways, amply made my point when he pointed out that there are very few children in attendance at any of those events. The last thing I would ever do is show a veteran disrespect. And I think by inculcating in our children that this is a day where they are recognizing veterans by being at an assembly with veterans, speaking to them about their experience on Veterans Day, is a way of teaching them what that day is about. In fact, on Veterans Day, the vast, vast majority of them are not recognizing veterans. Therefore, the meaning of the day is lost. And to Mr. Fadim's point regarding criteria, I think our criteria is how do we best show respect. That is, in that case, I mean, that's almost an educational lesson in itself. And by being in the presence of a veteran on Veterans Day, you are teaching them to show respect to veterans. In no way do I think that this is ripping something away from veterans. It is still a federal holiday. It is still a holiday that has been adopted by the state of Connecticut.
Cannelli, if you could wrap it up.
Half the schools in our county do not have the day off. This is not something where Fairfield would be a trailblazer in showing disrespect to veterans. I just think we are going to teach them that this is the day that matters. This is the day that we speak with veterans and hear of their tales, because more and more of them will have no one in their family that knows anything about this.
Thank you. Mr. Fadby, then Selectman Walsh.
The question I would have is whether if the intent is such that Veterans Day is in session, is it the intent to give another day off? If that is the intent, I don't think I'd be in favor of swapping Veterans Day and giving off another day off for whatever reason, where it doesn't have a purpose of lengthening the school year in a sense and have some academic value. If you're just swapping days, and Veterans Day is one of those days that you're going to swap for some other undesignated day that has no necessary meaning, I'm not sure I can support that. I would only support it if it was to academically extend the school year so you get some academic benefit out of it, not just simply swapping days.
Thank you. Selectman Walsh, and then I really want to wrap this up.
I would just like to disagree that we're disconnected from military service or divorced from it or whatever. I mean, we are in a time when we are in two current standing wars, where we have people from our country who are dying for freedom on a daily basis, and I see flags at half-mast around the state of Connecticut a number of times a year for people who are dying with our own state. Further, this district has men and women who, upon your preparation and when they leave and graduate, are going into those military services to serve us across overseas. And I think that giving them one day to honor them, to show everybody in this community that we are honoring them in that way, is the least we can do. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment on the amendment only. Please line up. Welcome, sir. Please state your name for the record.
Sure. My name is Tom Quinn.
And your address.
Okay. I'm on Milo Street in Fairfield, Connecticut. I am currently the commander of the American Legion, post at Owen Fish, post number 143. I can tell you the veterans in the American Legion are totally in favor of keeping the holiday. Okay? With all deference to you, whatever your family may think, okay, the men and women in my unit and other units in this town want this holiday to stay. When we joined the service, and I enlisted, by the way, I wasn't drafted, so the people that are out there now, they enlisted. Doesn't make them less soldiers because they enlisted. They're still going out there, carry a gun, and die for us. So whether or not they're drafted or enlisted, this is a day to honor veterans. In terms of what the kids do what kids do, okay? I've been at services at every one of our schools in my town, part of town, for the last 5 years for Veterans Day. And I can tell you that Stratfield and North Stratfield and McKinley do a fantastic job, okay, in honoring the veterans. And the kids do also while they're there. But every kid there really looked forward to the holiday, and they knew what it was for. It was for their grandfathers, their uncles, their brothers, their fathers, their sisters, and now their mothers, because they're all veterans. And I urge you, please, don't make us come back again, because we will, every single year, okay? We want Veterans Day, and we believe you owe it to us, bottom line, because we're out there for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Tina DeJarnette, 35 Quaker Lane. I realize this is a very passionate subject. I'm both a parent in town and I'm a teacher. I have a veteran World War I, World War II, and Korea. I'm the first generation that did not serve. This Veterans Day, as a teacher, I had the day off. My kids and I, one of which is a teenager and texted the whole way there, were at the monuments in Washington, D.C. on Veterans Day. And we were not alone. So there were many, many, many teenagers there. I had not seen the Martin Luther King, though I'd seen the rest of them. My daughter had not seen the Martin Luther King, and my youngest, it was her first time seeing any of those monuments. And to do it on Veterans Day with World War II veterans was phenomenal. If you want to make an example of the students, then as parents, model it in your neighborhood. Do something for Veterans Day. We as teachers are not the only ones responsible for teaching what Veterans Day is. Parents are also responsible. I do not go to D.C. every year, but every year I call my father, and every year I call my uncle, and thank them for their service, and my children do so as well. And I can't speak for the other schools, but I can tell you when we were open for Veterans Day at Ludlow High School, at the beginning of every class, someone came over the loudspeaker, made a quote, and that was it. And that was our Veterans Day celebration. So please don't tell me the schools do a great job. Elementary, yes, all my kids have been great in elementary. Ludlow High School, not when we were open for Veterans Day. Thank you.
J. Alfred Dunn. The subject is simple and complex, and it has two faces to it. Unfortunately or fortunately, my generations, looking like me, go back to before the 13 coalesced. So when it comes to fighting for this nation, I almost stand alone. Now, Veterans Day. It is true that here and there, the veterans are recognized, but all one has to do and embrace reality as look at the papers. They have all kinds of sales, even sales on used shoelaces. In fact, if you journey to any mall, you can hardly get in. Right now, it was mentioned that we are in 2 wars. Correct. But only 1% of the nation is involved. Now, what is the reality of the situation? Someone once stated, Samuel Johnson, I believe, that patriotism is the last refuge of scoundrels. Ambrose Bierce said, It was the first. If we go back to the Revolutionary War, we will see 1/3 was for the rebels, 1/3 was for the crown, and 1/3 didn't give a so-and-so. Without a doubt, we are talking about teaching.
It's time. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Good evening, Ed Kurlick, 1157 High Street. I'm also the Holland Hill PTA Board of Ed liaison. I'm just kind of really confused. Maybe I was sleeping, but I don't know why this question even came up, because I don't know what we're trying to do here. Conserve days. If we're trying to conserve days, I see 3 school cancellation days for snow days, and if we need any more, well, it comes out of April break. So we're weighing, if I understand what's going on here correctly, we're weighing the veterans against April break. Am I wrong?
Yes.
I am.
Yes. There's no dialogue back and forth. Thank
Okay.
you.
Sorry I asked a question.
That's okay.
But I just think that it's dishonorable to not honor the veterans in this way in hopes of saving a day. Thanks.
Thank you. Back to the board. Any further discussion? Mrs. Brand, and then Mr. Compertito.
A lot of strong opinions. I'm going to reiterate. I do not think anyone sitting at this table or in the audience, regardless of what they thought we should be doing, intended any disrespect one way or the other. In fact, quite the contrary. And I think that should be made very clear. No one here had any thought as to thinking any less of our veterans at all.
Thank you. Mr. Compertito?
Yeah, I'd just like to say I brought the motion not out of to show disrespect to anybody who served our country, and I have family members who have done so. I brought the motion because I thought our children would be better served and our veterans would be better honored by learning about Veterans Day, on Veterans Day, with veterans in the classroom, rather than having the day off. And that was my purpose for bringing it. It wasn't I will talk further later on other issues with the calendar that will deal with length of school year. This was a motion that, I stood on the green this past Veterans Day with all 12 of the other people that were there that weren't town officials. People don't honor our veterans on Veterans Day, and I thought that our children would be better served in the classroom doing that, and that's why I made the motion. And I'd like to move to call the question.
Do we have a second? Okay. All in favor of calling question? Okay, fine. Is the board prepared to vote then? All in favor of the motion as amended? To amend the motion, I'm sorry. Oh, no.
Could you point of order? Can you say what the amendment is?
Sure. All in favor of not holding school on Veterans, of holding school on Veterans Day? In favor, Mrs. Kennelly, Mr. Convertito. Opposed? Mr. Liu, Mrs. Gerber, Ms. Iacono, Mr. Dwyer, Mr. Fataby, Mr. Carey, and Mrs. Brand. Motion fails. Back to the main motion. Are there any other amendments to this motion? Seeing none? No. Hello, Mr. Convertito.
Yes, I have another amendment. And I would move that we eliminate the 1 week off in February, do the President's Day weekend, which will be the weekend of I believe, the 18th, and move the Professional Development Day from the 18th of January to the 15th of February. Doing so would pick up 5 days, shortening the school year, giving us more time to use for snow days and unexpected climate weather, whether it be hurricane or tropical storms and so forth, before we would go into April break. We would still have a break in February based on the long holiday, the 4-day weekend, and I believe it makes more educational sense. I mean, our kids are back less than 2 weeks before they have a 4-day weekend in January. And I think it's more appropriate that we move that, shorten that break in February, and leave the excess time at the end of the school year for contingency issues. The amendment is to eliminate the 19th, 20th, and 21st of February and the 22nd. Move the 18th, eliminate January 18th as Professional Development Day, and make the Professional Development Day February 15th.
Is there a second? Mrs. Brand. Is there discussion? Sure, Mr. Carey.
Through the chair to the administration, will moving the Professional Development Day create any problems for the administration?
We're looking out. We don't care.
That's good enough for me, thank you.
How's that?
Is there any further discussion from the board? Mr. Liu?
I think the calendar is perfect just the way it is.
There you go.
I would like to leave it, personally. You know, I think these are complicated issues, but they're complicated in vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry, and that everybody has different tastes and preferences and things that are important. I can see, yes, a little bit of help in terms of some extra snow days, but I also see that there's a lot of benefit, and from the people that I've talked to and read from, it seems that also February break is an important time, especially in the East, where people are using that as a vacation time, as well as a time for when people are sick a lot, and that added break is a good time to rest. I'm concerned that if we take it away, people will just be absent anyway. I'm kind of one who feels like don't fix something that ain't broken. I personally just think that the calendar is good and we should go on.
Thank you. Any further comment from the board? Mrs. Brand and then Mr. Fattabine.
My concern with having and tacking days on in the end, I've seen happen a real lot. And not all our schools have air conditioning, and we have kids sitting in classrooms that get so terribly hot. They don't even go outside half the time. So I don't think we are benefiting with any instructional time when we have to add days on in the end. I'd like to try and see us try this for a year, because it's not a make or break. It's not a devastating change, but I think we ought to give it a shot. And again, because I think we'll have more quality instruction time at that time of year than we do when it starts to be 90 degrees and humid outside and inside.
Any further discussion from the board? Selectman Walsh.
Question to Dr. Title or his staff. Is there any educational benefit to having the February vacation, or is there any benefit of taking it away? Is it a plus or minus either way what the decision is? Educationally, from an educational theory side.
I would say, given all the disruption that we have in our calendar when we get back in January with the different breaks that we have, plus the snow days mixed in, I think you could make a case that from an educational point of view, that those 4 potential days in February are better educationally than 4 days at the end of the year. But I think you balance that against some of the concerns, the community norms and values of it. So I think if the board decides to leave it there, I don't think it's a huge issue, but I think there is an educational case to be made for having school for 4 days that week.
And can you just educate me, the professional development days, why do they need to happen during the school year and take away from educational time? Can they be either taken 1 or 2? I mean, I saw one's being done in August. Can't 2 be done in August? Can't be 2 or 3 be done at the end of the year in our air-conditioned buildings so that we're not having half days here and there and 1 full day in January?
We actually have 3 teacher work days prior to the start of the year.
Yeah.
So we do the bulk of them there. We think it's most effective to do your professional development relatively early in the year. Certainly later than February, you know, it's kind of late to be doing it because you want teachers to, implement the professional development right away. And so having the professional development days that are part of the teacher's contract that are above and beyond the student days. So you're talking about 182 student days no matter what. And then there's 5 additional teacher work days beyond that. That having one on election day and then one in the early winter makes sense in terms of spacing them out and also giving us time to have teachers actually implement it. I think to have a professional development day at the close of the school year would be a complete waste of time. To be perfectly honest, everybody is mentally checked out. There would be a tremendous loss of opportunity to implement, given that people would then be disappearing for the summer. And so therefore, while I'm not opposed to moving the day a little bit later to the early part of February, I think that's about the latest we'd want to have it. So that would be my opinion on it.
The day that's off, a full day off where the students aren't in class in January for the professional development, why wouldn't we have that day be the very first day back? Let's have to give the kids one extra day in January. The teachers come back for a day of professional development.
You could do that.
And then we just kick this thing off, and this way we're not having to start the year and all of a sudden take a Friday off.
No, you could. I mean, I think attaching it there is possible. Either way, it's going to have the same effect on your end of year, right? So, I mean, you've got 2 essentially contracted professional development days that need to be slotted in. Regardless of where you put them, that causes your year to go 2 days longer. So it's really a question of where is it best placed in terms of the effectiveness of professional development. You could make the case that January 2nd could work. The 18th, hooking it onto a 3-day weekend, or the 15th. I think all of those are viable options.
And how many, in Fairfield County, how many schools that don't have a vacation until April?
We have that data in the handout, in the research we did.
I think it's only 4.
The schools that have no February vacation.
No February, no March, just in April.
Right. That's typically, even when the February break is shortened to a 3-day weekend, or in some cases a 4-day weekend, virtually everybody keeps the 3rd week in April as the April break. Nobody moves it back. You can't move it back into March because of CMTs, and people try to stay on the CES calendar for April vacation for the shared programs. So the April vacation is pretty standard throughout Fairfield County, and actually most of the state, that the 3rd week in April is the break there. But the February vacation, I'm just looking down the list here, it looks like the majority of districts take the break, if I'm counting those correctly.
Yep.
The ones that say no are Monroe, Norwalk, Ridgefield, and Shelton. All the rest of Fairfield County takes the February break. But it's an option that the board can exercise.
Has there ever been any studies, both here, your knowledge here in Fairfield County and your previous district's knowledge, where a district would go from one where, say, they had a February vacation, missed it, and a study made on whether their CMT scores or any other scores went up based on that?
I think it's almost impossible to isolate that effect. But I think one of the reasons that some districts across the state have shortened or eliminated the February break has been the fact that when 7 or 8 years ago, when the CMTs moved from September to March, some districts felt that to have kids off for the week in February was a week of learning time leading up to CMTs. That some districts did use that as an opportunity, but I don't know of any studies that prove a statistically significant effect on the CMT scores as a result of it. It was sort of a kind of made sense to some districts. This is a very district and town specific issue. There are places that have eliminated it, got a lot of grief for it, put it back in. There are places that have eliminated it and never looked back. And there are places that wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole because the community would never stand for it. People are all over the map. It's a political, like Mr. Liu said, for any proposal, probably 1/3 of the people in favor of it, 1/3 of the people opposed to it, and 1/3 of the people wouldn't care. So it's really a community decision about what you feel, the 9 of you feel is best for this town at this point in time. But I think you can make an educational case to have school during the February, what is now the February break, but I would not then move the April vacation. Regardless of what you do, I would leave the April vacation as the 3rd week in April.
Have you spoken to districts where they've taken it away the February and then gone back to it, and what the reasons they've gone back to it are?
It's community pushback.
Okay.
You know, people who are used to taking family vacations during that time. That's usually what the big issue is there.
Thank you.
Mr. Carey?
To clarify what the motion is on the table, so...
Sure. Do you want
If I-
Mrs.
if-
Gerber to read it back?
Oh, yeah, just let me know where
Learning.
let me know where we're at now.
Okay, well, I have the motion as being to take, let's see, to take the 19th through the 22nd of February off, to eliminate Professional Development Day from, no, I'm sorry, wait. To take, all right, to leave the 19th through the 22nd as days of school, to eliminate Professional Development Day from January 18th and put it as on for February 15th.
So we have a 4-day weekend in February under this proposal.
Yes.
Did I miss it, or has there been any talk about increasing the amount of days at the end of the year before we start getting into April? And if not, can I make a friendly amendment to do so? So my friendly amendment would be to add 3 days to that number so that we don't start cutting into... Would you like to do 4? My friendly amendment would be add 4 days into that number on the bottom right-hand corner of our calendar so that we have now 7 days before we start getting into our only vacation in that side of on the board.
That has been
Well-
accepted.
Well, let me just comment, just a procedural point on that, not on the merits of it. We don't know what other amendments are floating out there. So the consequence of, if this amendment is approved, is we would go from 3 to 7. But there could be additional amendments that change that. So we don't want to wait till the very end and then decide where we are with number of days.
That's fine, I just don't want to leave
Would
this
that be a
as...
natural consequence, I guess is my
Yes,
question.
it would be,
Okay.
yes. The natural consequence would be, again, it's another board decision, obviously, but the reason that's there is to avoid going to school that last week in June, I assume because of the heat and because people have had it. So that would change, if the amendment carries, then, and no other amendments are made that impact the end of the school year, then we would change that from the first 3 to the first 7.
So do we have to make a motion to make that change, or does that
I
happen
wouldn't do it
automatically?
right now. I would wait till the very end.
I can tell the chair I have no intention of making any further motions.
The
This is
chair
it on the
appreciates
calendar.
that.
I think it would be, understood.
I
We
share
would
the
write calendar
sentiment.
that way.
Okay. Is there public comment? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to moan.
It's quite all right. I'll make this much shorter. I know you can't have an additional motion until that is voted on. I just want to float something out there, kind of on the idea that this is all building on each other. Is that one, I would actually agree with Mr. Walsh on this, that I think the January 18th professional development should actually be moved to January 2nd. Now, I'm still very torn about the February break. Having heard from many, many community members, it's really quite evenly split. The only thing everyone is emphatically agreeing upon is what happens to April break, and preferring some type of buffer in June be increased. If that ends up being that the will of the board is to eliminate the February break, by virtue of January 18th, in my opinion, would be better served moving to January 2nd. Again, just keeping it out there as an option, that I think if the vote were to eliminate the February break, the days should be the 18th and the 19th, making that the long weekend, which would also keep us that much more in accordance with CES, and that it is only 3 days being added in June. And I know that ultimately that would have to be in the form of another motion. I recognize that, which I'm willing to do, but just as options are out there.
Can amend an amendment.
Can I speak to that? Sure. My only hesitancy in moving the 18th to the 2nd would be, we would be bringing the kids back essentially for 2 days, the 3rd and the 4th of January, and I think that's, that 2-day week is kind of a, senseless point to bring kids back for 2 days.
We do that in August.
Okay, I'm
Instruction
going to go to
doesn't go
public
on.
comment. And I see a long line. I myself have not made up my mind, so I'm
Mine will be
interested to hear.
quick. Tina DeJarnette, and, I don't have an opinion this way or the other than next year my daughter's a junior, and if you eliminate February, you've just eliminated when I can take her, which means me as a teacher, I'll be out during the school year, and she'll also miss classes. But that's only for junior parents, and that's there. My question is, Mr. Carey, I think, got to one of them, which was, well, what happens if we go over? Are we taking away April? And it sounds like you will deal with that. But the other is, most of the townships in Connecticut, because we do get snow, that have over the 180 mandated days, which Fairfield does, takes those days first and doesn't make them up. So I wonder why you're not even considering the days that were over the 180 that we do not have to make up as snow days, and most of the state does that you're not even considering that before you're looking at taking away vacations to extend the school year. Again, no opinion either way on whether or not I like February break or not, but those are just my thoughts.
Thank you.
Oh, you knew my name, right?
We got it. Thank you.
Jay Wolk. I live at 1157 Stratfield Road. My voice is going. I oppose, it's my opinion, I oppose you taking away February break. What I've did a little study on my own, just give it a little different perspective on maintenance. The custodians that I have talked to in various schools, they look forward to this break to clean the schools. Mr. Liu brought up a good point about it gives time for students to get better. I just viewed my elementary school where my daughter goes and looked at the absentee list. There were 30 children out. So I think it's a time where where the custodians and our principal, Mr. Pichet, had said to me that he looked forward to this break to clean all the floors and to get the schools all cleaned and to maybe get the infection out. So just my opinion. Thank you.
Ann Pasco, FEA President. I've been here more than 4 decades. So just let me tell you, we've had a March break, no February, no April. That was a disaster. Parents took the kids out in February and in April because that's what they were accustomed to. The FEA office does have that data. There is no data more recently on the amendment, which would be to close the school, keep the schools open in February, but I can tell you that the same pattern would hold true. Families that go away in February would take their children out and go away. Teachers will do makeup work, but they do not tutor. So you have a revolving door. That is the week that we always have a snow day, even though we're off. So I don't know what your net gain would be. And it often has been the week where the flu has struck and the amount of kids that are out is significantly high. So those are just things to consider. I'm not going to weigh in either way, but I can tell you that when a community is used to doing something and you change it, they continue to do the something. So I don't know how much education would go on with some or many of the kids not there.
Hi, Sue Dowd, 27 Pickwick Street. I never expected to be back this quickly. I thought I was going to have a longer vacation, but when I heard, I guess read on the patch and heard around town that February vacation might be going away, I had to show up and just speak out on it. My preference is to keep the vacation, not because I am going away, but personally, but as like Mrs. Pascal said, there are a lot of families who probably have their plans already, have their airline tickets purchased, You don't wait until February vacation, till the fall. You have to really do it in advance, and they'll go anyway. The kids, especially at the high school level and the middle school level, but especially the high school, they really need that time off. Our kids are so stressed today with all the AP classes they take. So many of them have like 4 and 5 AP classes. They have 6 organizations, clubs they belong to. They're doing sports, and it really they're already burnt out by that February vacation, and it doesn't. So they need the time off. The teachers who are trying to teach these kids and they're already burnt out and looking forward to time away. It's just like not a good situation. You're coming off again for the high schoolers midterms in January, only like 2 weeks before. And I mean, it's just that the kids need the time off. The teachers, having been a teacher, it's tough to teach when the kids are zoned out, and it's tough to teach when half of them aren't going to be there, and it's whether it's due to illness or being, away. So it just, again, if it's not broke, why change it? I think you'll have more of an outpour. A lot of people don't realize that this is even up on the agenda tonight. So,
Thank you, Mrs. Dow.
Christine Vitale, 254 Vernon Hill Road. I'm one of the Board of Ed reps for Dwight. Our executive board met last week, and we voted as a board. We voted in favor of eliminating the February break. Primarily, Dwight has no air conditioning at the end of the year. We really want to get our kids home sooner. Nobody really likes them going far into June. Also, we thought that it'd be better for them to be in school in February because it's before the CMTs, and a lot of people did not like losing April break. We talked about parents just pulling their kids out of school. It's very hard because when you assume you have a vacation and then days get taken away, that really messes up vacation plans also. We didn't go into long weekends, but as a board, we did support getting rid of February. We sent out an email to the school community, and really we heard nobody complaining about that motion. So that's just the word from Dwight.
Thank you.
I'm Matt Hutzelman, 317 Pansy Road in Fairfield. I just see no reason to eliminate or to change the calendar as is. I think it works fine. I think again, like other people said, a lot of people will just take their vacations anyway. Especially if there's a 4-day weekend, they'll just extend it into the next week. I think that happened a lot in April with the last snow days of last year. There were hardly, probably at Osborne Hill, there was half attendance. I know this summer, the heat in June is a concern. At Osborne Hill, it was warm. It was probably 80, but it wasn't too bad. And I just say, and I would say for us stay-at-home parents, the summer is kind of long enough as it is. So to extend it any more might challenge the mental stability of some of us stay-at-home parents. So I'd like to. I'd rather have a 2.5-month break than a 2 3/4 week break, and that's all. Thank you.
Mark Patton, 503 Valley Road, RTM member, District 7. Change is good. I fully support this amendment exactly as proposed for the reasons that many of you have discussed. January is traditionally, as we know, in early February, the times where we have the most snow days. We already have several days off from the disasters at the beginning of the year, and I also have 2 kids in the school system, and trust me, it seems like they go back to school for 2 weeks, and then they have a snow day, and they have 2 days of school, and they have a snow day, and then they have 2 days of school, and they have a snow day, and suddenly there's February vacation, and like, why do we need a vacation? Definitely, the North Stratfield School, where my kids go, is very hot at the end of the year, and I don't feel that, that they don't do a lot those last 3 days of school, and we all know this. And the hotter it is, the less they do, because, the more difficult it is. So, again, I support it, and I think you should all too.
Hi, Doreen Herron, 53 Forest Avenue. I'm not going to state my personal opinion on what we should do because I think it does vary. However, I do think a fact is that all the schools do have heat, and not all the schools have air conditioning. So I think the later we go in June, the less learning there is going on in school. At Sherman, I have the unique position. One of my children are in the annex, which is air conditioning, and one of my children are in the main building. And the last weeks in June, my daughter, who does not have air conditioning, is not learning. She's rotating in the rooms that are air conditioning so she can watch a movie to cool down, and then goes to the main building to sweat some more. So anything that we can do to move up the school year and not have it in late June, I do think is educationally beneficial to our students. Thank you.
Hi, Julie Gottlieb, 153 Applegate Road. I spoke to a number of friends about this matter to sort of get my own poll, and I'm going to speak for the working parents, both members of the couple. At the moment, I'm not a working parent. I would like to be. But when I was a working parent, it was completely hellacious where you were going to stick your kid during February vacation. A lot of us can't afford to go away. We're not skiing, we're not going to the Caribbean or any place exciting like that. And I would far prefer that my child be in school in February, as would about the 8 or 9 people that I spoke with, and then have a longer, and the impact in the summer. It's just for us, I dread February vacation. Always have, always will, so I'd be happy to see it go, as would they. Thank you.
Back to the board. I'm sorry.
Well, first of all, I agree with Mrs. Brand when she was saying, it wouldn't hurt to try this. This isn't forever. I mean, we do vote on the calendar every year, although I did realize, actually, that a year from now, when we vote on this calendar, it will be before the February break. So, in a way, we're kind of committing to 2 years. I believe, obviously we could change our minds and decide to vote, but we're voting on something we don't know whether it's going to be good or not. But we are talking also about next year, so this coming February break is there. I don't know if there's some confusion with that. So we're talking about February of 2013, not 2012. This school year calendar has been voted on by the previous board. So in any event, I don't think it would hurt to try, but that's just my opinion.
Fran?
Relative to something, I actually contacted members of the Board of Health and asked them if there was any evidence that supported taking February break as having any kind of medical benefit, particularly deterring colds and flu. And both the pediatricians got back to me and actually gave me a study, but they have found absolutely nothing to substantiate that, and their personal experience in this area as pediatricians also did not substantiate that. So there is no medical benefit to it.
Is come.
Does anybody need the motion read back?
Yes. Okay. The motion is to amend the original. Motion to amend the original motion to eliminate February break but keep President's Day, and to eliminate the January 18th Professional Development Day and move it to February 15th. Yes.
Okay. All in favor? Voting in favor, Mr. Compertito, Mrs. Gerber, Mr. Fattabine, Mr. Carey, and Mrs. Brand. Opposed? Mr. Liu, Mrs. Kennelly, Mr. Dwyer. Abstentions? Just myself.
Passed.
Motion carries.
Any other amendments?
Any other amendments?
Vote
Now
on
we
the amended
need to vote on the motion as amended. Any further discussion? Any comments from the public?
So are we going to put the 7 days in now?
We'll add it in. We'll just add it in automatically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for clarification, the last day of school will now
We'll
be...
move it back 4 days.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Okay, all in favor of the motion as amended?
On the whole calendar.
On the whole calendar?
Yep.
Voting in favor, Mrs. Kennelly, Mr. Convertito, Mr. Liu. It's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, sorry. New business. Item A, endorsement of a parent's guide for the prevention of alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use booklet. Recommended motion that the Board of Education endorse The Parent's Guide for the Prevention of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Drug Use booklet. You all received an enclosure in your packet, which was enclosure number 8. I received this from a community member who was reaching out on behalf of the Alcohol Task Force. This is a booklet that is used it's given to the parents and students at the high schools. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm yapping on. Is there, did I move it?
Not yet.
Oh. I read it. Oh, is it moved by? Sorry, it's getting too late for Mr. Compertito. Second, Mr. Carey.
Now you're good to go.
You heard my blabber on about what it is. They're really looking to just put our name on the front of their booklet and say that we endorse their booklet. Is there any discussion? Mr. Liu.
Yeah, I'd personally just like another meeting to read through it some more.
It's not about the content of the book.
I know,
It's just
but
about
putting our name on it, we are getting behind it. And I just feel, again, as one of my pet peeves, that we need more time sometimes to do this kind of stuff. So.
I understand. Just so you know, they're going to press. That's why they asked us to take it up. They're actually holding it for us. Any further board discussion? Any comment from the public? Seeing none, is the board prepared? Nope.
Hi, Wendy Benevegna, Village Lane. I'm a member of the Fairfield Cares Town Task Force on Alcohol and Health and the co-chair of the Freshman Forum at Fairfield Ludlow High School. And I just want to say that the Community of Concern Parent book is a great resource for parents. It reinforces the information that the parents and students are given at the freshman/ninth grade forum programs. We're in our 3rd year with that program at the high school. And this booklet is a resource that reinforces everything they've got. We have a wide variety of youth-serving organizations, both sponsoring and endorsing the booklet, and we would love to include the Board of Ed on it. It shows a commitment in partnering to keep our youth safe and healthy, and a shared mission to improve the quality of life in Fairfield community. It's the booklet was put out by a bunch of Georgetown Prep parents, and it's expanded. It's kind of like a to various communities. I know Wilton has done it, Greens Farms Academy has done it, just as a point of reference. And we, in doing it in Fairfield, are able to customize it to Fairfield with our own, some of our research data, our own resource information within the community, and the laws, and we've got the police department has helped us customize the back half of the pamphlet. Anyway, it seems like a terrific follow-up to the program we've presented, and I think you've got a list of the people who are sponsoring and endorsing, so I won't go through that, but I encourage you to support it. We would very much like to have you on there with all the other organizations that are already behind it and have financially supported it as well. Thank you very much.
Catherine Giff on 11 O'Clock Road. I encourage you and I ask you to please accept the invitation from the Fairfield Cares Task Force to endorse the Community of Concerns booklet. Fairfield Cares Task Force is a really very inclusive group. It's made up of so many of the community members who try to partner and cooperate to produce many layered programs to educate the adults in our community about our children's underage drinking. The first such program to target parents was the 9th grade forum, which is now in its 3rd year at both of the high schools. And the Community of Concerns booklet provides a real visual of a unified community, a community of adults. It's so many members that are on there that, as Wendy said, you have the list. So it's that share a mission to protect our children. And this is also a great takeaway for the reference. We hope to give it to 1,000 families this year. The majority of the booklets will be distributed at the 9th grade forum. And the forum now in its 3rd year is actually just picking up the momentum. So this is the year that's going to change, that the majority of our high school parents and families will be part of this program, and we just hope to grow it. And it's nice to have a little professional touch with like a real takeaway versus the mimeographed almost to give my age away handouts that we have been using. An endorsement implies no money. So we've already got the money and the sponsorship, so we would appreciate your help. And I'm sorry it took up any time, but we were going to really regret not talking if somebody said no. So we were like, this is our chance. So thank you. Sorry it's so late.
Any further discussion by the board? All in favor? Oh, Mr. Fattabine.
Just a point of clarification. I just want to make sure I understand what we're endorsing here. We were given in our packet a printed booklet called the Town of Wilton, Connecticut, that has some cover page that looks very similar to what was also in our packet with a photocopy of the Town of Fairfield, Connecticut. So is it my understanding that this text in this photocopy, particularly to Fairfield, Connecticut, is going to be is what we're endorsing, as well as what I would call sort of common content or factual content with the loose leaf pages here? I mean, is that?
That's the explanation I got. What I asked for were any materials they could provide to us because the Fairfield booklet obviously hasn't been printed yet. So they provided a sample copy from Wilton, and our booklet obviously would be relevant to Fairfield. The common content would be the same, and that's a sampling of what the
I just wanted to make that
booklet.
clarification because
Yes.
I don't like to endorse things I don't know what they are.
Yes, I fully understand that they called me, asked for our endorsement. I told them I had no authority to give them that endorsement without bringing it to the board, so that's why it's before you this evening.
Okay, that's.
And I tried to get as much material as I could to provide to you.
I think I understand what we're endorsing now. Thank you.
Anyone else? All in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. Item B, discussion of a board education member guide. I put this on the agenda because during our discussion with the bylaws this year and in the past years during my tenure on the board, there's often been a discussion when people have tried to make bylaw changes that some of these things would be good for the board but don't necessarily belong in the bylaws. So Mr. Dwyer actually offered up the idea of putting together a board handbook, and I am going to turn the microphone over to him to let him share his ideas on whether or not we should head in this direction. I don't want to have a discussion this evening on what goes into the handbook. I just want to know if we're heading on the right track, if we start to sort of gather information and work in that direction. If this isn't something the board wants to do, then we could just end the whole conversation tonight. So, Mr. Dwyer.
One of the comments that often is made is that as a board of 9 members, we may debate as 9 members, but we govern as one board. And during the orientation session with Dr. Teitel, he mentioned certain expectations, protocols, assumptions that we all have of how we work with one another. There's also, in between times, some, I'll say, just administrative issues of the ID badge and when those things happen. And so in one sense, the 5 of you have an advantage over the 4 of us is because you know those things in the back of your head and we don't. And I thought it would be helpful if there was a handbook that was a public document that says here are the mutual understandings that we have of one another and how we work together and just certain administrative matters. I have no preconceived notion of the topics that will go in there, and I would actually suggest that we take the next month or 2 to gather ideas from each of the board members, perhaps from the staff, and look at other school districts to see what they might put in such a handbook, and then take some time at the, let's say, the last meeting of January to talk about it and aim at trying to find a way to get an approved document by the end of February. I'm in no rush to do this, but I would like to have the board think that this would be a helpful process and one that perhaps in each annual evaluation of the board could be a document that we would look at and just keep dynamic and update. So that's what the thought is that I had of asking Pam if, I wouldn't call it guide, I would call it handbook. So that's my thought. I'm not sure that I need a motion, but I think I would like some consensus statement.
Yeah, I was hoping we'd just get a sense.
That says, and I will say I've recruited Mr. Compertito to work on this as well, so that we can have at least two eyes on it as we help develop the first draft.
Mr. Compertito?
Yeah, I don't want to belabor the point. I think it has its own merits. I think there are other issues that may be more appropriately addressed in bylaws, and I think, you know, if Phil and I have some discussions that we can sort of weed that out and bring you guys a proposal, and that's more how I'd like to handle it at this point, very informally.
Okay. Can I get a sense of where the board wants to go with this? Mrs. Brand?
I think some of the things that Mr. Dwyer just mentioned, like for instance ID badges, actually are in our regulations. You know, we have a policy book, and I certainly appreciate the thing is tremendous. In fact, I think I helped Perry Lou, you, Mrs. Iacona, Mr. Fadabine, Mr. Carey, all help get oriented in my way in terms of what I was familiar with and some of the regulations that you may not have been appreciative of. I used a new member guide that CABE had put out, which I found very helpful. But beyond that, I'm reticent to approve something because I don't know what I'm approving. I'm uncomfortable. We have our statutes that actually govern what we do. We have Robert's rules that govern what we do. And beyond that, it's just actually the policies that we create and also regulations that, you know, wearing a badge, which is documented already. So I really don't see the need for this, and I'm uncomfortable about pursuing something when I don't even know what I'm actually approving.
Just for clarification, nobody's asking you to approve anything.
No, but whether we move forward with it.
Mr. Fadabine?
Maybe a clarification to sort of follow that up. Is this intent to be informational, but not necessarily something that is going to be binding on the board? I mean, is this just an informational document to help new members get acquainted with, or the public understand some of the practices of the board? I mean, this is by no means intended to be some sort of extension of our policies, which we're all bound by. It's just an informational piece?
That's my understanding of it.
Yeah. I don't think you can pass something that is not connected to the policy. This is gathering various pieces of information in a single place, is the way I was thinking of it.
Right, so it's not something that we'd vote on and then be bound by. In other words, whatever, so I'm not even sure, I would think we need a formal vote. If you want to put together an informational packet that is informational as to what the policies and practices of the board is, and the board members help you in doing that, I don't know if we have to have, in essence, a board action on it, in my opinion.
Well, I didn't want members to start working on something and then have people be like, we have no need for this handbook. So that's really what we're here today, to find out if you would find it useful. I mean, I can tell you now, I mean, I sat in my head trying to think of everything it was that I needed to tell you because there's no collective place where this is all written down. Mr. Liu.
Thank you. I mean, I think some of this possibly came out of our last discussion about the bylaws. I agree with both what Mrs. Brand and what Mr. Fadabine said. I mean, look, if you're going to come up with a document that is going to be a public document that's just sort of guidelines but is non-binding, if somebody wants to work on that, I guess that's fine. I would want to know, though, the difference between some of the questions that came up the other day about trying to tighten without constricting ideas on minutes, when we vote and when things are presented, which I think are more things that need to have are guidelines and clarifications that need to be part of our bylaws without them being so iron tight that we can't move without them. But if we're going to have something that's just a document that isn't voted on and isn't binding, I don't understand how that really helps us. And I understand that your idea was to try to help that situation, but I'm wondering how that can help the situation.
All right, I just want to get a sense. Can we go around the table if you guys want Mr. Dwyer and Mr. Compertito to work on pulling something together?
I think having an orientation handbook can only be helpful.
Yes? Okay, so the sense of the board is to go ahead and put something together for review. Thank you.
I'm going to take this as a sign of tremendous enthusiasm because just the discussion alone at 10:40 at night is worth something. Thank you.
Question, if I may.
Sure.
Since this sort of segues with what we were talking about before, with those, what I think they were 3 or 4 items that were the possibility of amending or our bylaws, I personally don't really want to wait until February to see if those things are going to come under the guidelines or not. We put it on the table. I'd like to make an amendment that we put it back on the agenda, that for next meeting, I think if Mr. Compertito is comfortable with that, and I don't mind helping him, or Mr. Dwyer as well, getting involved in trying to look at those 3 to 4 items and bringing them back to the table, and can decide whether or not these are bylaw issues. But I think it would be, I'd like to make that amendment now that we put this back on next time's agenda, which is what?
You have
January
to,
10th.
Procedurally, you'd have to move to put them on the table right now, and then you'd have to
Right.
make a motion to postpone them to a different date.
Okay, so I'll make a move to put them on the table right now. Could I have a second, please?
Mrs. Brand seconds.
And then I guess I would,
Need a majority vote to put it back on the table, so.
can we put it back on the table for January?
No, you
Oh.
you have to put it on the table right now,
would-
so.
Okay, it's on the table right now.
Okay, so all in favor?
Okay.
Mrs. Kennelly, Mr. Compertito, Mr. Liu, Mr. Dwyer, and Mrs. Brand. Opposed? Mrs. Gerber, Ms. Iacono. Abstentions? 2. So what was the vote on that?
Any comment on my abstention?
Was there a majority? No.
You don't have to explain your
What was
abstention.
it?
Any more than I have to explain mine.
So motion carries.
So it's on the table.
So now you can postpone it.
And then I'd like to make an amendment that we put it on our next agenda for motion. Sorry. Excuse me? It's on the table. Okay. Okay. So, help me out here. What do I need to say? Okay. It's on the agenda for next,
It'll come up under old business.
under old business. Yes?
Just move to postpone it to the next.
Move to postpone to the next meeting, January 10th. All in
second.
favor, if that's okay with
Second
Mrs.
by Mr.
Iacono?
O'Hare, yes,
Yes,
that's
okay.
fine. All in favor, aye.
Thanks,
Unanimous.
guys.
There you go. Is there a second? Oh, we forgot public comment. See, and you thought I was rushing all night. Anybody have anything they want to add? No public comment. Open board comment. Please say no. Thank you. Motion to adjourn. Thank you for your patience with me this evening. Moved by Compertito, seconded by Carrie. All in favor, aye. Unanimous.
So you don't even need a motion to adjourn.
No, you don't? Oh, thank
Declare
you.
the meeting is ended.
Oh, good, I'm glad that's...
That'd be a good one. Cookie saying, there being no further business?